Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Catherine Stormwright, but everyone calls me Cat. I've been a park ranger at Blue Ridge Parkway for 15 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything these mountains could throw at me. Boy, was I wrong. I grew up in Kansas, right in the middle of Tornado Alley. Lost our family farm when I was 12. A monster F4 twister just wiped it clean off the map. That's what got me interested in weather. I wanted to understand the thing that destroyed my world. Got my master's degree in atmospheric sciences, specialized in mountain weather patterns. Figured the mountains would be safer than the plains. No tornadoes up here, just some thunder and lightning. The scar on my left arm is shaped like a lightning bolt. Got it when I was 16, standing too close to a fence during a storm back home. The doctor said I was lucky. Lightning usually kills you or leaves you with brain damage. Me? I just got a permanent reminder to respect the power of storms. That's probably why they put me in charge of emergency response here at Grandfather Mountain. At 5,146 feet, it's the highest peak in the Blue Ridge, and it gets some of the worst weather on the East Coast. Wind speeds that'll knock you flat, temperature drops that can kill unprepared hikers, and electrical storms that light up the sky like God's own fireworks show. I keep detailed records of every storm, every weather event, every atmospheric anomaly. My little office is packed with charts, graphs, and weather reports going back decades. The other rangers think I'm obsessed, but that data has saved lives. When I see certain pressure patterns forming, I know exactly when to close trails and evacuate campsites. What I didn't know, what I never believed, despite working alongside Cherokee Rangers for years, was that some storms aren't natural at all. It started on September 23, 1989. I remember the date because it was a Saturday, and Saturdays are usually quiet around here. Most day hikers clear out by afternoon, leaving just the serious backpackers and the occasional research team. I was in my office around 3 in the afternoon, updating trail condition reports, when my weather monitoring equipment started going crazy. The electrical activity sensor was showing massive readings, the kind you'd see during a severe thunderstorm. But when I looked outside, the sky was crystal clear, not a cloud anywhere. I stepped onto the observation deck to check my instruments. The air was still, temperature holding steady at 68 degrees, humidity normal. Perfect hiking weather. But the hair on my arms was standing up like I was in the middle of an electrical field. That's when I heard the screaming. 2 hikers came running down the Grandfather Trail, a young couple from Charlotte. The woman's hair was singed, and the man had burn marks on his hands that looked exactly like electrical burns. They were babbling about lightning that came out of nowhere, about a clear sky that suddenly exploded with electricity. There was no storm, the woman kept saying. No clouds, no thunder, nothing. Just this bright flash, and then pain everywhere. I called for medical evacuation and started asking questions. They'd been near the summit, taking photos at Callaway Peak when it happened. According to their story, lightning had struck the ground all around them in a perfect circle, like someone was drawing with electricity. The woman's camera had been destroyed, melted into a lump of plastic and metal. But lightning doesn't work that way. Lightning takes the path of least resistance from cloud to ground. It doesn't draw circles. It doesn't strike during clear weather. And it certainly doesn't target people with that kind of precision. I should have written it off as some kind of freak accident, should have filed my report and moved on. But that night I kept thinking about what the man had said just before the ambulance took them away. It wasn't random, he'd whispered, gripping my sleeve, with his bandaged hands. The lightning, it was watching us. I swear to God it was watching us. I've seen what real lightning can do to people. I've coordinated rescues after severe electrical storms, pulled bodies out of the woods that were burned beyond recognition. But I'd never seen burns quite like theirs. Too precise, too controlled. Like someone had taken a cattle prod and deliberately traced patterns on their skin. That night I called my friend Tom Bearcloud, one of the Cherokee Rangers. Tom's grandmother used to tell stories about the old days, about spirits that lived in the mountains before the white settlers came. I'd always figured they were just stories, ways to teach kids to respect nature and stay safe. "Tom," I said when he answered the phone, "tell me about the thunder being again." There was a long pause. "Why do you want to know?" "Just humor me." My grandmother said the thunder being was the guardian of Grandfather Mountain, a spirit made of storm and lightning, older than the Cherokee themselves. It would punish anyone who harmed the mountain or disrespected its power. "But Kat, those are just stories," I finished. "Yeah, I know." But as I hung up the phone and looked out at the dark silhouette of Grandfather Mountain against the star-filled sky, I wasn't so sure anymore. Something was wrong up there. My 15 years of experience, my atmospheric science degree, my weather-predicting instincts, they were all telling me that what had happened today was impossible. And in my line of work, impossible usually means dangerous. The next few days were quiet, which should have been a relief. Instead, it made me nervous. I kept checking my weather instruments, looking for signs of the electrical activity that had burned those hikers. Everything read normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the mountain was watching me. On Tuesday, 3 hikers came down from the summit with similar stories. No visible storm, but electrical burns that formed strange patterns on their skin. This time I was ready with my camera, documenting everything. The burns weren't random. They looked almost like symbols, geometric shapes that reminded me of Native American petroglyphs. I started hiking the summit trail every morning before dawn, checking on my remote weather sensors. The data they collected didn't match what was happening to people. According to my instruments, atmospheric conditions were perfectly normal, but the sensors themselves were showing signs of electrical damage. Circuits fried, metal components melted in ways that suggested massive power surges. It was Thursday morning when I first saw it. I was checking the sensor array near Callaway Peak, the highest point on Grandfather Mountain. The sun hadn't come up yet, just that gray pre-dawn light that makes everything look washed out and strange. I was replacing a burned-out circuit board when I felt the hair on my neck stand up. You know that feeling you get right before lightning strikes? That electric tension in the air that makes your skin crawl? It was like that, but 10 times stronger. I could taste metal in my mouth, and my fillings started to ache. I looked up from my work, and that's when I saw it moving through the valley below. At first I thought it was just a cloud formation, some kind of unusual fog pattern. But clouds don't move like that, with purpose, with intelligence. This thing was flowing between the trees like liquid electricity, about the size of a small building but constantly shifting shape. As I watched, frozen with a mixture of terror and fascination, it began to rise toward the summit, and as it got closer, I could see that it wasn't a cloud at all. It was alive. The thing looked like a man, but made of storm clouds and lightness, and 15 feet tall at least, with arms that crackled with electrical energy and eyes that glowed like blue fire. When it moved, thunder rolled through the valley, even though there wasn't a storm cloud in the sky. I should have run. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get off that mountain as fast as possible, but I couldn't move. The thing was looking right at me, those electric eyes boring into mine, and I felt like I was being judged. Then it spoke, not with words, with electricity. My weather radio, clipped to my belt, suddenly burst to life with static and electronic noise that somehow formed patterns, rhythms that almost sounded like language. The creature was trying to communicate. I fumbled for the radio, my hands shaking so bad I could barely work the controls. "Hello?" I whispered into the microphone, feeling ridiculous. "Can you understand me?" The static changed pitch, became more urgent. Through the electronic noise, I started to pick out something that might have been words. Danger. Mountain. Protect. The creature raised one massive arm, pointing down into the valley on the south side of the mountain. Lightning flickered between its fingers, and for just a moment, I could see what it was pointing at. A cleared section of forest where survey stakes had been placed in neat rows. A development project. I'd heard rumors that some company wanted to build a resort complex down there, right at the base of the mountain. The environmental impact studies were still ongoing, But word was they had enough political backing to push it through regardless of what the scientists found. "You're trying to warn me," I said into the radio, "about the development." The static pattern changed again, became almost musical. If I hadn't known better, I would have sworn the thing sounded relieved that I understood. But then my radio battery died, and the electronic song cut off abruptly. The creature looked at me for one more long moment, those electric eyes sad and ancient, before it began to fade like morning mist. Within seconds, it was gone, leaving only the smell of ozone and the memory of impossible thunder. I sat there on the summit for another hour trying to process what I'd seen. My scientific training told me it was impossible. You can't have a humanoid figure made of electricity and storm clouds. But my weather sensors told a different story. They'd recorded massive electrical activity right at the time of my encounter, power readings that should have killed everything within a half-mile radius. That afternoon, I drove down to the valley to look at the development site. The survey stakes were there, just like I'd seen from the mountain. But something else was there too. Trees that had been struck by lightning in perfect patterns, burn marks in the ground that formed symbols identical to the ones I'd photographed on the injured hikers. Someone, or something, was fighting back against the development, and it was using lightning as a weapon. I should have reported what I'd seen to my supervisors, should have called in the state authorities, maybe even the federal agencies that handle unexplained phenomena, but I knew they wouldn't believe me. Hell, I wasn't sure I believed me. Instead, I did what I always do when faced with something I don't understand. I started collecting data. That night, I set up additional monitoring equipment around the mountain, focusing on areas near the development site. If this thunder being was real, if it was causing the electrical anomalies, then I was going to document everything. Maybe I couldn't explain it, but I could at least prove it was happening. What I didn't expect was for it to start happening every night. By the end of the week, I had enough evidence to convince myself I wasn't going crazy. The thunder being was real, and it was getting stronger. Every night around midnight, my sensors would detect massive electrical activity moving through the foothills. Rest. The pattern was always the same. It would start near the development site, move up the mountain in a spiral pattern, and end at the summit where I'd first seen it. And every morning, I'd find new lightning strikes, new burn patterns, new signs that something impossible was stalking through my mountains. The development company, Pinnacle Resort Corporation, had started moving equipment onto the site. Bulldozers, excavators, temporary trailers for their work crews. And every piece of equipment that stayed overnight got hit by lightning. Precision strikes that destroyed engines and electrical systems while leaving everything else untouched. I was documenting one of these strikes on Friday morning when I met David Pinnacle himself, the company's CEO. He was standing next to a bulldozer that looked like it had been hit by artillery, shaking his head and talking to his insurance adjuster. "Ranger," he called when he saw me approaching with my camera. "You work for the Park Service, right? What can you tell me about the electrical storms up here?" I looked at the bulldozer. The lightning strike had hit the engine compartment with surgical precision, melting the motor into scrap metal while leaving the cab and blade completely untouched. The burn pattern in the ground around it formed a perfect circle, just like the ones that had appeared around the injured hikers. "This wasn't a natural lightning strike," I said carefully. Pinnacle raised an eyebrow. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Natural lightning follows the laws of physics. It takes the path of least resistance, strikes the highest point, spreads out randomly. This," I gestured at the destroyed bulldozer, "this was targeted, deliberate." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You telling me someone's sabotaging my equipment with some kind of lightning gun?" "I'm telling you that you might want to reconsider this project." His expression hardened. "Lady, I've got $50 million invested in this resort. I've got environmental permits, construction permits, and political backing all the way. To the governor's office. Some freak electrical storms aren't going to stop me." That night, the thunder being appeared at my ranger station. I was working late, going through weather data and trying to find some natural explanation for what was happening. The coffee was bitter and cold. My eyes were burning from staring at computer screens, and I was starting to think I was losing my mind. Then, every electrical device in the building started going haywire. My computer monitor flickered and went out. The radio crackled to life, filling the room with static. The lights dimmed, then flared so bright I had to shield my eyes. And in that brilliant electric glow, I saw the Thunder Being standing just outside my window. It was bigger than before, more solid-looking. The electrical energy that made up its body was brighter, more controlled. When it raised one massive hand and pressed it against the glass, the window didn't break. It just hummed with power like a tuning fork. My weather radio started speaking again, that electronic voice I was learning to understand. Help. Mountain dying. Stop them. I grabbed my portable radio and stepped outside, trying not to think about what 15 feet of living lightning could do to a human being. Up close, the Thunder Being was even more impressive and more terrifying. Its electric eyes were sad and desperate, like an animal that's been backed into a corner. I'm trying to help, I said into the radio, but I don't know how to stop them legally. The static pattern changed, became more urgent. Through the electronic noise, I heard something that chilled me to the bone. Children, dying, water poisoned. It took me a moment to understand what it meant. The resort development wasn't just going to destroy habitat, it was going to poison the mountain's water supply. Runoff from the parking lots and buildings, septic systems that couldn't handle the load, chemical fertilizers for the golf course. All of it would flow into the streams that fed the entire ecosystem. You're not just protecting the mountain, I whispered. You're protecting everything that lives on it. The Thunder Being nodded, a surprisingly human gesture from something that shouldn't exist. Then it pointed toward the development site, and I saw what it wanted me to see. 3 more bulldozers had arrived that afternoon, along with a crew of night shift workers who were planning to start clearing trees under floodlights. They had no idea what they were walking into. You have to warn them, I said urgently. Don't hurt them. They're just doing their jobs. But the Thunder Being was already fading, dissolving into wisps of electric mist that disappeared into the night sky. And from the direction of the development site, I could hear the distant rumble of thunder. I jumped in my truck and drove down the mountain as fast as I dared. But I was too late. By the time I got to the construction site, it was chaos. The floodlights had exploded in showers of sparks, the workers were running for their lives, and every piece of heavy equipment was on fire. But nobody was hurt. Somehow, despite all the destruction, the Thunder Being had managed to terrorize the work crew without injuring a single person. The burn patterns in the ground formed words this time, spelled out in letters 10 feet tall. Go away. I found the crew foreman hiding behind his pickup truck, shaking like a leaf. What the hell was that thing? He demanded when he saw my ranger uniform. Some kind of military weapon? I don't know, I lied. But I think you should shut down operations until we can figure out what's causing these electrical problems. He laughed bitterly. Lady, I've been in construction for 20 years. I've worked in hurricanes, tornadoes, and ice storms, but I've never seen anything like that. It was like the lightning was alive, like it was hunting us. That's exactly what it was, I realized. The Thunder Being wasn't just causing random electrical events. It was waging a war to protect its mountain from an enemy it couldn't fight with conventional weapons. And I was caught in the middle. The next morning, I got a call from my supervisor in Asheville. David Pinnacle had complained to the Park Service about my interference with his construction project. I was being ordered to stay away from the development site and to stop encouraging rumors about supernatural phenomena. That same afternoon, Pinnacle brought in a team of specialists from a military contractor, electromagnetic warfare experts with equipment designed to neutralize electronic systems. If the Thunder Being was made of electricity, they reasoned, then they could disrupt it the same way they'd disable enemy radar. I tried to warn them that they were dealing with something beyond their understanding, but they wouldn't listen. They set up their equipment in a defensive perimeter around the construction site, electromagnetic pulse generators that could fry any electronic device within a half-mile radius. That night, the real war began. The battle started at midnight, just like always. But this time, I was ready. I'd positioned myself on a ridge overlooking the construction site, far enough away to be safe, but close enough to see everything. My weather instruments were recording every electrical pulse, every electromagnetic surge. Whatever happened tonight, I was going to document it. The thunder being rose from the valley like a pillar of living lightning, bigger and brighter than I'd ever seen it. The electromagnetic pulse generators kicked in immediately, filling the air with a high-pitched whining sound that made my teeth hurt. For a moment, the thunder being faltered, its electrical body flickering and dimming. The military contractors cheered, thinking they'd won, but they didn't understand what they were fighting. His wasn't just some electrical anomaly or atmospheric phenomenon. This was a guardian spirit that had been protecting Grandfather Mountain for thousands of years. It was part of the mountain itself, connected to every tree, every stream, every living thing on the peak. And when it got angry, the mountain got angry too. Thunder rolled through the valley, so deep and powerful that I felt it in my bones. The trees began to sway even though there was no wind. Animals started fleeing the forest in panic. Deer, bears, even the birds took flight in massive flocks that darkened the sky. The thunder being grew larger, drawing power from the storm clouds that were forming overhead with impossible speed. Lightning began striking all around the construction site, but not random strikes, controlled bolts that targeted the electromagnetic generators with surgical precision. The military contractors fought back, turning their equipment to maximum power. The air around the construction site shimmered with electromagnetic energy, creating a bubble of interference that should have disrupted any electrical phenomenon. That's when I realized they were killing it. The thunder being's form was becoming unstable, its electric body breaking apart into scattered wisps of energy. It was weakening, dying, and with it would die the mountain's ability to protect itself from future development. I couldn't let that happen. I grabbed my portable weather radio and started driving toward the construction site, broadcasting on every emergency frequency I knew. This is Ranger Stormwright with an emergency weather warning. Severe electrical storm moving through the area. All personnel must evacuate immediately. The military contractors ignored me, too focused on their battle with something they didn't understand. But some of the construction workers started running for their vehicles, and that created enough chaos for me to get closer to the center of the conflict. The thunder being saw me approaching and tried to warn me away, its electronic voice crackling through my radio with a desperate urgency. But I kept driving, right through the electromagnetic field that was tearing it apart. My truck's electrical system died instantly. The engine cut out, the lights went dark, even my digital watch stopped working. But I was close enough now to see the thunder being clearly, close enough to understand what was happening to it. The creature was in agony, its electric body being disrupted and scattered by the military equipment. But even as it was dying, it was trying to communicate with me, trying to make me understand something crucial. I climbed out of my dead truck and ran toward the center of the electromagnetic field, ignoring the contractors who were shouting at me to get back. The air was thick with electrical energy, making my hair stand on end and my skin tingle with dangerous current. The thunder being was directly in front of me now, towering and magnificent even in its death throes. Its electric eyes met mine, and in that moment, I understood everything. It wasn't just trying to stop the development, it was trying to show me something. The mountain wasn't just being threatened by one resort complex. It was part of a larger pattern of destruction that would spread throughout the entire Blue Ridge ecosystem. This development was just the beginning. Through my weather radio, now somehow functioning despite the electromagnetic interference, I heard the thunder being's final message. Not in static and electronic noise this time, but in perfect, clear English. Remember what you have seen. Tell them what will happen if they do not stop. Then it gathered what remained of its power and released it all at once. The electromagnetic pulse was incredible, a wave of electrical energy that knocked out every electronic device within miles. The military contractors' equipment exploded in showers of sparks. Every vehicle in the area died instantly. Even my weather instruments on the mountain went dark. But in that final blast of power, the thunder being showed me visions of the future. I saw the resort complex completed, its parking lots, and buildings spreading like a cancer across the mountainside. I saw the streams running brown with pollution, the forest dying from acid rain and chemical runoff. I saw the entire ecosystem collapsing, species after species disappearing as their habitat was destroyed. And I saw other thunder beings, guardians of other mountains, appearing throughout the Blue Ridge as the development spread. A war between progress and preservation that would tear the entire region apart. When the light faded and my vision cleared, the thunder being was gone. The electromagnetic generators were smoking ruins. The construction equipment was destroyed beyond repair. And I was alone in the darkness, with the knowledge of what was coming. The military contractors were furious, demanding to know what I'd done to cause the electromagnetic pulse. David Pinnacle was screaming about lawsuits and government conspiracies. But I ignored them all and walked back to my truck, my mind racing with plans. I had to stop the development. Not just this one, but all of them. I had to find a way to protect the mountains that didn't involve supernatural guardians and electromagnetic warfare. Because if I couldn't, the thunder being sacrifice would be meaningless. And the war it had shown me in that final vision would destroy everything I'd spent my life trying to protect. It took me 3 months to build the case that would save Grandfather Mountain. The environmental violations were extensive once I knew where to look. Pinnacle Resort Corporation had falsified their impact studies, bribed local officials, and planned to dump their wastewater directly into streams that fed the mountain's ecosystem. When I presented my evidence to the EPA and the Cherokee Nation's environmental lawyers, the development permits were revoked within a week. David Pinnacle threatened to sue everyone involved, but his company was already under federal investigation for environmental crimes. The last I heard, he was facing criminal charges and his resort empire was in bankruptcy. The official explanation for the electromagnetic events was unprecedented atmospheric anomalies caused by unusual mountain weather patterns. My weather data supported this theory, and the scientific community was fascinated by what they called a new type of electrical storm phenomenon. I got written up in several meteorological journals and was invited to speak at conferences about extreme mountain weather events. I never mentioned the thunder being in any of my reports, but late at night, when I'm alone in my ranger station, I still monitor the weather frequencies. And sometimes, when the conditions are just right, I hear familiar patterns in the static. Electronic music that sounds almost like words, almost like a conversation between old friends. The thunder being isn't gone. Not entirely. It's resting, recovering, waiting. The mountain is safe for now, but there will be other threats, other developments that need to be stopped. And when that time comes, the Guardian will be ready. I've changed too. My weather predictions are more accurate than they've ever been, as if I can sense the mountain's moods and intentions. Other rangers have started asking me how I always know when storms are coming, how I can predict weather patterns that don't show up on satellite imagery. I tell them it's just experience, just 15 years of watching mountain weather. But the truth is more complicated. The thunder being left me with something when it died and was reborn, a connection to the mountain itself, the ability to hear the whispers of wind and storm that most people can't perceive. Tom Bearcloud's grandmother passed away last winter, but before she died, she asked to speak with me. Her final words were a warning and a blessing. The mountain has chosen you as its voice in the human world. Use that gift wisely. I keep detailed records of every weather anomaly, every unexplained electrical event throughout the Blue Ridge Mountains. Because I know the thunder being isn't the only guardian spirit protecting these ancient peaks. There are others, sleeping beneath other mountains, waiting for the day when they'll be needed to defend their territory. And that day is coming. I can feel it in the changing wind patterns, see it in the migration routes of birds and animals that are shifting earlier each year. Development pressure is increasing throughout the region, and eventually someone will push too hard, threaten too much. When that happens, I'll be ready. I've learned to communicate with the electrical systems that the thunder being uses to speak. I've mapped the ley lines of power that connect all the mountain peaks in the region. And I've made allies among the Cherokee Rangers and environmental activists who understand that some battles can't be fought with lawsuits and legislation alone. My name is Catherine Stormwright, and I'm the human liaison to forces that most people can't imagine. It's not the job I trained for, not the career I planned, but it's the job I was chosen for, and I'll keep doing it until someone else can take my place. Because the mountains need someone to speak for them in a world that sees them only as obstacles to be removed or resources to be exploited. The thunder being taught me that every ecosystem has a guardian. Every wild place has a defender. Most of the time, those guardians stay hidden, working through natural forces to protect what they love. But when the threat becomes too great, when the destruction goes too far, they reveal themselves. And when they do, they'll need someone who can bridge the gap between the human world and theirs. Someone who knows how to listen to the voice of thunder. That someone is me. End. My name is Jonathan Graveheart, and I've been a forest ranger for 15 years. Some folks think that's a peaceful job, watching trees grow, helping lost hikers, maybe dealing with the odd bear. They're wrong. The forest keeps secrets, and sometimes those secrets find you whether you want them to or not. I'm 41 years old now, and every morning when I look in the mirror, I see a man who's seen too much. The scar that runs from my left temple down to my jaw came from Vietnam. Same war that took my left eye. The limp in my right leg? That's courtesy of a landmine outside Da Nang. The gray in my beard and the lines around my good eye. Well, that's what happens when you can't sleep through the night without seeing the faces of people you killed. I volunteer for the dangerous assignments. Always have. My supervisor thinks it's because I'm dedicated. The truth is simpler and uglier. Part of me hopes one of these jobs will finally finish what that war started. It was October 1987 when everything changed. The leaves in Monongahela National Forest had turned brilliant red and gold, and the morning air carried that sharp bite that means winter's coming soon. I was stationed at the ranger office in Screaming Hollow, a name that should have been warning enough. Local Cherokee used to avoid this place, said it was cursed. White settlers ignored them, like they always did. That Tuesday morning, my radio crackled to life just after dawn. "Graveheart, you there?" "Yeah, I'm here." We lost contact with the research station up in Screaming Hollow yesterday. 7 scientists doing some kind of wildlife study, supposed to check in every 12 hours. My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. "How long since last contact?" 26 hours. We need you to hike up there and see what's what." I knew that research station. It was about 8 miles up the hollow, built next to an old Cherokee, the burial ground. The scientists had been studying Bigfoot sightings, of all things. Seemed harmless enough, just a bunch of college kids with too much education and not enough sense, looking for something that probably didn't exist. The hike up took me 3 hours. My bad leg always slowed me down on the steep parts, but I'd learned to work around it. The forest felt wrong that morning, though I couldn't put my finger on why. The birds were too quiet. The usual chatter of squirrels and chipmunks was missing. Even the wind seemed muffled, like the trees were holding their breath. I smelled it before I saw it. That sweet, sick smell of death that every veteran knows. It made my stomach clench and brought back memories I'd spent 15 years trying to forget. But this was different, stronger. Like whatever died here had been dead for a long time. The research station sat in a small clearing, and from a distance it looked normal. Solar panels on the roof, generator humming quietly, equipment scattered around like the scientists had just stepped away for a minute. It wasn't until I got closer that I saw the truth. The front door hung open, torn clean off its hinges. Deep gouges in the wood looked like claw marks, but they were huge, bigger than any bear I'd ever seen. The windows were shattered, glass scattered across the porch like broken teeth. I pulled out my service pistol and approached carefully. "Hello? Anyone there?" Nothing. Inside was worse. Furniture overturned, equipment smashed, papers scattered everywhere. But no bodies. No blood either, which somehow made it worse. In my experience, violence without blood usually meant the blood was somewhere else. I found them out back. 7 skulls arranged in a perfect circle around a fire pit, each one polished white as fresh snow. The rest of their bodies were nowhere to be found. Each skull faced inward toward the fire like they were watching something burn. Except there was no ash, no charcoal. The pit was clean, as if it had never been used. My hands started shaking, and not from the cold. This wasn't random violence. This was ritual. This was someone or something that knew exactly what it was doing, I keyed my radio with trembling fingers. Base, this is Graveheart. Static. I tried again. Nothing. The wind picked up then, moaning through the trees like a voice calling from far away. And maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it was the way sound carried in the hollow, but I could swear I heard something else in that wind. Screaming. I spent an hour trying to raise someone on the radio before giving up. The station had a landline, but when I picked up the phone, I got nothing. No dial tone, no static, just dead silence. The phone line had been cut clean through about 6 feet from the building. Whatever happened here, someone didn't want word getting out. I started documenting the scene with my camera, trying to think like the military investigator I used to be. The skulls were arranged with mathematical precision, each one exactly the same distance from the fire pit, each one facing the exact center. They'd been cleaned so thoroughly they looked like museum pieces. But it was the teeth marks I found that made my blood run cold. On one skull, a young woman, probably in her 20s, I could see clear bite marks along the jawline. Not human teeth. Not animal teeth either. These were something else entirely. Too big, too sharp, and arranged in a way that made no biological sense. I was photographing the bite marks when I heard the first stick break. Every soldier knows that sound. In the jungle, a snapping branch could mean death was about 30 seconds away. I dropped low and scanned the tree line, my pistol ready. Nothing moved. But the forest had gotten even quieter, if that was possible. Not even insects buzzing. Just me, 7 skulls, and whatever was out there watching. Another branch snapped, this one closer, to my left, maybe 50 yards out. "Who's there?" I called out, let out, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is Forest Service. Identify yourself." Silence. Then I saw it. Just a glimpse between the trees. Something tall. Too tall to be human. It moved wrong too, like its joints bent in directions they shouldn't. For just a second I caught sight of what might have been a skull where its face should be, but that couldn't be right. My radio suddenly crackled to life. "Graveheart, come in." I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Base, this is Graveheart. I'm at the research station. We have 7 dead, possible homicide. I need backup and a forensics team." "Copy that. We're sending a team up. ETA 4 hours. 4 hours. In Vietnam, 4 hours might as well be 4 years when something was hunting you, and I was pretty sure something was. I decided to wait inside the station. Whatever killed those researchers might come back, and I'd rather face it from behind walls than out in the open. But as I turned toward the building, I noticed something that made my mouth go dry. Fresh scratches on the doorframe, deep gouges in the wood that definitely hadn't been there an hour ago. Something had been at the door while I was examining the skulls, something big. I backed into the station and barricaded the door with an overturned desk. The windows were already broken, but I could see out in all directions. If anything tried to approach, I'd spot it coming. That's when I found the journal. It was lying open on one of the researchers' desks, the last entry dated just 2 days ago. The handwriting was shaky, rushed. October 13th. We found tracks today. Bigger than anything in the books. Dr. Martinez thinks they're fake, but I measured them myself. 18 inches long, 7 inches wide. The local Cherokee we talked to won't come near this place anymore. They keep talking about something they call the Skull King. Said it was a Bigfoot that died when came back wrong. The burial ground is older than anyone thought. We found bones buried in layers going back centuries. All of them show signs of violence. This place has seen death for a very long time. Something's been watching us from the trees. We hear it moving around at night, but it never comes close enough to see clearly. Williams swears he saw glowing eyes yesterday, but Williams has been hitting the bottle pretty hard since we got here. I'm starting to think we should pack up and leave. This doesn't feel like research anymore. It feels like we're being studied. The journal entry ended there. I flipped through the rest of the pages, but they were blank. A shadow passed by one of the broken windows. I spun around, pistol raised, but saw nothing. Just trees swaying in the wind. But the shadow had been wrong somehow. Too tall, moving in a way that didn't match the wind patterns. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Big ones. Heavy enough to shake the floor beneath my feet. But they weren't coming from outside. They were coming from underneath the building. The research station had been built on concrete pilings, leaving about 3 feet of crawl space beneath. Something was moving around under there, something that by the sound of it was way too big to fit in that narrow space. The footsteps moved from one end of the building to the other, slow and deliberate. Then they stopped. Everything went quiet for maybe 30 seconds. I held my breath, straining to hear anything. Then something hit the floor directly beneath where I was standing. Hit it hard enough to make dust rain down from the ceiling. Something was trying to break through. I scrambled toward the door, pushing the desk aside. Whatever was under there, I didn't want to be trapped inside when it came up. But as I grabbed the door handle, I heard something that stopped me cold. Whistling. Someone was whistling a tune outside, just beyond the tree line. It was an old song, something my grandmother used to sing. But the voice doing the whistling was wrong. Too deep, too hollow, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. And there were words mixed in with the whistling. Words I could barely make out. Johnny went to war. Johnny came back. Johnny's got blood on his hands. My heart stopped. Nobody had called me Johnny since Vietnam. Nobody alive, anyway. The whistling moved around the building, circling like a predator. And with each step, the voice got clearer. Johnny killed children. Johnny burned villages. Johnny's debt ain't paid. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to think. This wasn't random. Whatever was out there knew about my past, knew about the things I'd done in the war. The civilians who died because of orders I carried out. The villages we burned. The children who... No. I couldn't think about that now. I had to focus on staying alive. The whistling stopped right outside the front door. Then came the voice, clear as day, speaking in a tone that sounded like gravel in a blender. I know you're in there, Johnny Graveheart. I know what you did. I know what you are. A pause. And I know how you're gonna die. The voice outside went quiet, but I knew whatever it was hadn't left. I could feel it out there, waiting. In Vietnam, we called it the enemy's presence. That crawling sensation between your shoulder blades that meant someone had you in their sights. My backup was still 3 hours away. 3 hours might as well be 3 years. I moved to the back window and looked out toward the forest. The skull circle was still there, but now there was something else. More bones scattered around the clearing. Ribs, leg bones, arm bones. They hadn't been there an hour ago. Something was bringing them up from God knows where. That's when I saw the others. 3 figures coming up the trail toward the station. For a moment, hope flared in my chest. Maybe backup had arrived early. But as they got closer, I could see they were wearing Ranger uniforms, and I recognized the walk of the lead figure. Sarah Whitfield, 26 years old, fresh out of training. Behind her were Mike Deadwood and Tom Ironforge, 2 veterans, who'd been working these forests for almost as long as me. I opened the window and called out, "Sarah, get back, don't come any closer." She looked up and waved. "John, thank God you're okay. Base sent us when you went quiet on the radio." I said, "Get back! There's something in the woods, something that killed the research team." But they kept coming. Sarah was young and eager, the kind of rookie who thought nothing bad could happen to her. Mike and Tom should have known better, but maybe they figured 3 Rangers with guns could handle whatever had spooked me. They were wrong. Sarah reached the skull circle first. I watched her stop and stare at the arrangement, her face going pale. She keyed her radio. "Base, this is Whitfield. We're gonna need that forensics team and..." Jesus Christ, what is that? She was looking at something behind the skulls, something I couldn't see from my angle. Her face went from pale to gray, and she started backing away. "Sarah," Mike called out. "What is it?" There's something moving in the bones." That's when the skeleton came up out of the ground. It rose like something from a nightmare. The complete skeleton of what looked like a massive bear, but wrong in every way that mattered. The bones were too big, arranged in impossible angles, and they moved with a purpose that had nothing to do with how bears actually moved. The thing stood on its hind legs, towering 8 feet tall, and turned its skull toward Sarah. Empty eye sockets somehow fixed on her with intelligence that made my skin crawl. Sarah went for her gun, but she was too slow. The skeleton bear dropped to all fours and charged. I'd seen men die in war, seen them torn apart by bullets and shrapnel, but I'd never seen anything like what happened to Sarah Whitfield. The bear skeleton hit her like a freight train, and the sound of bones breaking was like gunshots echoing. G through the hollow. She screamed once. Then the thing was on top of her, and the screaming turned into something else, something wet and horrible that I'll hear in my nightmares for the rest of my life. Mike and Tom opened fire, pumping round after round into the skeleton. Bullets passed right through the spaces between ribs, doing no damage at all. You can't kill something that's already dead. While they were focused on the bear, more skeletons started rising from the ground. Human ones this time. They came up in a rough circle around the clearing, cutting off any escape routes. Some were old, weathered bones that had been in the ground for decades. Others looked fresh, probably the missing research team. Tom Ironforge was the first to realize we were surrounded. He spun around, taking in the ring of skeletons, and I saw him make the calculation every soldier learns to make. How many enemies? How much ammunition? What were the odds of survival? The answer was simple: 0. "Fall back to the station," he yelled to Mike. But as they turned to run, more skeletons rose between them and the building. These ones carried weapons, rocks, tree branches, anything they could use to kill. Mike Deadwood made it maybe 10 yards before 3 human skeletons tackled him. He fought hard, I'll give him that. Fought like the Vietnam veteran he was, using every dirty trick he'd learned in the jungle. But you can't fight an enemy that feels no pain, that doesn't bleed, that keeps coming no matter how much damage you do. The skeletons pulled him down and started tearing him apart, literally. Bones separated from bones with sounds like breaking branches. Mike kept screaming long after any human should have been dead. Tom tried to help him, but more skeletons were rising every second. The ground in Screaming Hollow must have been packed with bones going back centuries. And now, something walked, was calling them all up at once. Through the broken window, I could see Tom firing his pistol at anything that moved. He was a good ranger, a smart man who knew these woods better than anyone. But knowledge doesn't help when the rules of reality stop applying. A skeleton that might have once been a Cherokee warrior grabbed Tom from behind. The bones were stained dark with age, and the skull still wore the remnants of feathers and war paint. Tom spun and fired point blank into the skeleton's ribcage. The bullet passed right through and shattered against a tree. The skeleton reached out with bony fingers and grabbed Tom by the throat. I don't know how long bones without muscle can squeeze, but they can squeeze hard enough. Tom's face turned purple, then blue. His gun fell from fingers that couldn't hold it anymore, and through it all, I could hear that voice from the forest, laughing. Not human laughter. Something deeper, colder. The sound of someone who'd been dead so long they'd forgotten what life felt like. Tom's body went limp. The skeleton held him up for another few seconds, like it was savoring the moment, then let him drop. But the nightmare wasn't over. As Tom hit the ground, his bones started separating from his body, not torn apart like the others, but gently, carefully removed. The skeleton that had killed him was taking Tom apart piece by piece, adding his bones to its own collection. Within minutes, Tom Ironforge was gone. In his place stood a fresh skeleton, the bones still wet, wearing the tattered remains of a ranger uniform. The new skeleton turned toward the research station, toward me. And I realized the horrible truth. Whatever was controlling these things wasn't just killing people, it was recruiting them. Outside, the laughter got louder, and mixed in with it, I could swear I heard voices. Sarah's voice, Mike's voice, Tom's voice. All of them calling my name, all of them asking why I hadn't saved them, all of them sounding hungry for company. The skeletons surrounded the research station, but didn't attack. They just stood there. Watch it. waiting for something. Through the broken windows, I could count at least 30 of them. Some human, some animal, some that looked like they might be both. That's when I saw him. He came walking out of the tree line like he owned the place, which maybe he did. 15 feet tall if he was an inch, built like a man but wrong in every detail that mattered. His skeleton was massive, built for power and violence. And where his skull should have been, he wore a crown made of human skulls. 7 skulls from the research team formed the base, but there were others too. Dozens of them, stacked and wired together into a grotesque parody of royalty. Some of the skulls were old, weathered by decades in the ground. Others looked fresh, probably my 3 teammates. The Skull King moved through his army of bones like a general inspecting troops. Every skeleton turned to watch him pass, and I could feel their devotion even through the walls of the station. This wasn't just some monster. This was their leader, their creator, their god. He stopped in front of the research station and looked directly at me through the broken window. His eye sockets glowed with a sick green light that reminded me of phosphorus flares in the jungle. When he spoke, his voice came from all the skulls in his crown at once. "Hello, Johnny Graveheart." It was Sarah's voice, then Mike's, then Tom's, then voices I didn't recognize. Probably the research team, maybe people who died in these woods decades ago. "We've been waiting for you," they said in unison. "We've been waiting so long." I raised my pistol, knowing it was useless, but needing to do something. "What do you want?" The Skull King tilted his massive head, and the skulls in his crown shifted like they were whispering to each other. "I want what you owe," he said. "What you've always owed." And then he showed me. The world around me faddened, and suddenly I was back in Vietnam. Specifically, I was back in a village outside Da Nang on a rainy Tuesday in 1968, the day that changed everything. We'd gotten intelligence that the village was harboring Viet Cong. Our orders were to search and destroy. What we found were farmers and their families trying to live their lives in the middle of a war they didn't start. But Lieutenant Morrison was convinced they were hiding weapons. When the village chief couldn't produce any weapons, Morrison decided they were lying. When the villagers couldn't understand his broken Vietnamese, he decided they were being deliberately difficult. I watched it all happen again, every terrible detail. The interrogations that became torture, the searches that became destruction. The moment when Morrison decided that if we couldn't find any evidence of Viet Cong, we'd make sure there couldn't be any Viet Cong. "Burn it," he ordered. "All of it." I could have said no, should have said no. Instead, I followed orders. I always followed orders. 37 people died that day. Men, women, children. We told command they were enemy combatants. The report said we'd discovered a weapons cache and been forced to defend ourselves. The report was a lie, and I helped write it. "You remember now," the Skull King said, and I was back in the research station. "You remember what you are." The crown of skulls began to glow brighter. Each skull spoke in a different voice. "You killed us," said one in heavily accented English. "You burned our homes," said another. "You murdered our children," said a third, this one barely old enough to have been talking when they died. "And then you came home and pretended to be a hero," said Sarah's voice. "Pretended to be someone who protects people." The Skull King stepped closer to the station. With each step, more skeletons rose from the ground. Not just human ones now. I could see the bones of deer, bears, wildcats, even what looked like a massive elk with antlers like tree branches. "This place is where the guilty come to pay," he said. "This hollow W has drunk the blood of the innocent for 200 years. Cherokee killed by settlers. Settlers killed by Cherokee. Hunters killed by their prey. All the violence, all the death. It soaks into the ground, into the bones buried here." He gestured to the skeleton army surrounding the building. "And sometimes when someone has spilled enough innocent blood, the bones remember. They rise up to balance the scales." I looked at my gun, counting bullets. 6 shots left. Against 30 skeletons and something that used to be a Bigfoot before it became a god of vengeance. "You can't kill what's already dead," I said. No, the Skull King agreed, but you can join it. The skeletons began moving toward the station, not rushing, not attacking, just walking with the patient determination of something that had all the time in the world. I could have run, should have run. But where do you run when your sins follow you home? Instead, I did something I should have done 30 years ago. I opened the door and walked outside. You want justice? I called out to the Skull King. You want payment for what I did? Fine, but let's do this right. The skeletons stopped moving. The Skull King tilted his massive head. You want to die like a soldier? He asked. I want to die honest, I said. Those people in Vietnam, they didn't deserve what happened to them. I've carried that weight for 20 years, and it's time to put it down. I set my gun on the ground and stepped back. But I'm not going quietly. You want my bones for your army, you're going to have to work for them. The Skull King looked at me for a long moment. Then he began to laugh. Not the hollow sound from before, but something almost human, almost admiring. Very well, Johnny Graveheart. Let's see what kind of man you really are. He waved his hand, and the skeletons backed off. This was going to be between him and me. The last fight of my life. The Skull King came at me like a freight train made of bone and hatred. No weapons, no tricks, just raw power and the weight of every innocent person who'd ever died in these woods. I dodged his first swing and landed a punch that would have dropped any human. My fist connected with his ribcage and did absolutely nothing. Fighting a skeleton is like fighting a building. You can hit it all you want, but you're not going to hurt it. His backhand caught me across the jaw and sent me flying. I hit the ground hard, tasting blood, but rolled back to my feet. In the jungle, staying down meant dying. We fought among the bones of his victims, scattered skulls, watching our struggle with empty eye sockets. Every time he knocked me down, I got back up. Every time I landed a hit, he barely noticed. But I noticed something else. With each punch I threw, each time I refused to stay down, the green glow in his eye sockets flickered. Just a little. Like doubt creeping in. Why do you fight? He demanded, grabbing me by the throat and lifting me off the ground. You know how this ends. I looked up into that crown of skulls, into the faces of people I'd helped kill 30 years ago, and I told the truth. Because they deserved better than what I gave them. Because my teammates deserved better than what happened here. And because maybe if I fight hard enough, that means something. For just a moment, the Skull King's grip loosened. You feel guilt, he said, and it sounded almost surprised. Every day, I whispered. Good, he said. Then he snapped my neck. I woke up dead. That's the only way I can describe it. I was lying on the ground next to the research station, looking up at a sky that seemed too bright, too clear. When I sat up, I could see my own body a few feet away, neck twisted at an impossible angle, eyes staring at nothing. But I could also see everything else. The forest looked different now, like I was seeing through new eyes. I could see the history of every tree, every rock, every patch of ground, layers of time stacked on top of each other like pages in a book. The Skull King stood over my corpse, no longer glowing with that sick green light. The crown of skulls had changed too. The malevolent energy that had powered it seemed dimmed, settled. Welcome to the truth, Johnny Graveheart, he said, and now his voice was just his voice, not a chorus of the dead. I stood up, expecting to feel the usual aches and pains of my 41-year-old body. Instead, I felt nothing. No pain from my war injuries, no hangover from last night's drinking, no weight of guilt crushing down on my shoulders. What happens now? I asked. The Skull King gestured to the skeleton army surrounding us. They stood at attention, but there was something different about them too. The mindless hunger was gone, replaced by something like peace. Now you understand what this place really is, he said. Not a prison for the guilty, a sanctuary for the lost. I looked around at the skeletons and realized I could see them as they really were. Not monsters or weapons, but people who died with unfinished business. People who couldn't rest until the scales were balanced. The Cherokee called me the Skull King, he continued, but that's not what I am. I'm just the first one who figured out how to stay. When they killed me in 1952, I was angry enough to refuse death, and anger has a way of calling to anger. He knelt beside my body and gently closed its eyes. But you didn't die angry, Johnny. You died honest. That changes everything. Over the next hour, I learned the rules of my new existence. The skeletons weren't slaves. They were volunteers, people who'd chosen to stay and help balance the cosmic scales. Some had been victims who wanted justice. Others, like me, had been perpetrators who wanted to make amends. The Hollow wasn't cursed. It was consecrated. A place where the universe's moral mathematics worked properly, where ACs, Tions had consequences, and debts got paid. And now I was part of it. The government response came exactly as the Skull King predicted. Military teams arrived to find 7 dead researchers, 3 dead rangers, and 1 missing ranger whose body was never recovered. They blamed chemical weapons, declared the area an ecological disaster zone, and put up fences to keep people out. But I know the truth now. Those fences aren't to keep people out of the Hollow. They're to keep what's in the Hollow from coming out. Because we're still here. All of us. The Skull King and his army of the dead, waiting for the next person who owes a debt they can't pay. The next perpetrator who needs to face their victims. The next soldier who followed orders they should have refused. Sometimes, late at night, I patrol the boundaries of our territory. I can see through the eyes of every skeleton bird, every bone-white deer, every reformed predator that serves our cause. The Hollow has grown since I arrived. It's not just about this place anymore. It's about balance. It's about justice. It's about making sure that people who profit from violence eventually pay their debts. And there are so many debts left to collect. The war criminals hiding in suburbs, pretending to be grandfathers. The corporate executives who've poisoned rivers and buried the evidence. The politicians who've sent young men to die for lies. They all think they're safe in their comfortable lives, protected by time and distance from the consequences of their actions. They're wrong. Because now I help write the reports that get filed away in government basements. I help decide which cases get classified, which investigations get buried, which names get added to certain very special lists, and sometimes, when someone on those lists goes camping in the wrong forest or takes a hunting trip to the wrong mountains, they find out that the universe keeps better books than they thought. My name was Jonathan Graveheart, and I was a forest ranger for 15 years. Now I'm something else. Something that makes sure the guilty don't sleep peacefully forever. Something that remembers when everyone else forgets. Something that proves, one way or another, that every debt eventually comes due. The forest keeps secrets, like I said at the beginning. But sometimes those secrets keep you too. My name is Elena Ravencrest, and I need to tell you what happened on Blood Mountain. People think they know the story, but they don't. They can't. Because if they really knew, they'd never sleep again. I was 34 then, working as a ranger in the Chattahoochee National Forest in Georgia. 8 years I'd been doing the job, and I was good at it. Real good. I could track a deer through thick brush, read animal signs like a book. And I'd put down 3 rabid bears and 2 mountain lions that got too close to campers. My hands were steady, my aim was true, and I wasn't afraid of anything that walked, crawled, or flew in those woods. But I was afraid of one thing: losing my son. My ex-husband Jake was trying to take Tommy away from me. Said I was an unfit mother because of my dangerous job. Said no woman should be out in the wilderness with a gun, dealing with wild animals. The custody hearing was in 2 weeks, and my lawyer wasn't hopeful. Jake had money, a steady office job, and a new wife who stayed home and baked cookies. All I had was my badge, my gun, and 8 years of keeping people safe in the mountains. Tommy was 10 years old with my dark hair and his father's blue eyes. He loved it when I told him stories about tracking animals and protecting hikers. He'd say, "Mom, You're like a superhero, but real. That's what kept me going through the long nights and the court papers and Jake's nasty phone calls. I had to prove I could protect people. I had to show the judge that being a ranger made me a better mother, not a worse one. I had to win. The call came in on a Tuesday morning in late September. 8 college kids from Atlanta had gone backpacking in the Blood Mountain wilderness. They were supposed to check in Monday night. When they didn't, their parents called Park Services. Probably just having too much fun to remember, said my partner Steve Blackwood. He was 52, gray-haired, and had 3 kids of his own. You know how college kids are. But I had a bad feeling. The mountains had been strange lately. Animals acting weird, bears coming down too early for winter. Even the birds seemed nervous, like they were watching something. We found their campsite around noon, 8 tents arranged in a perfect circle around a cold fire pit. But the kids weren't sleeping in late or nursing hangovers. They were dead. All of them. The scene looked like a slaughter. Bodies torn apart, blood everywhere, pieces of clothing and gear scattered through the trees. But here's what made my skin crawl. They were arranged, placed in specific spots around that campfire like they were part of some sick ceremony. Jesus Christ, Steve whispered. He'd been a ranger for 20 years. And had seen plenty of animal attacks. What the hell did this? I knelt down by the nearest body, a young woman, maybe 19. Her throat was torn out, but the bite marks were huge, bigger than any wolf or bear I'd ever seen. The wounds were clean, like whatever killed her had razor-sharp teeth and knew exactly where to bite. Steve, look at these tracks. The ground around the campsite was soft from recent rain, perfect for reading sign. There were paw prints, but they were massive, as big as dinner plates, and mixed in with them, clear as day, were human footprints. Bare human feet walking alongside the animal tracks. That's not possible, Steve said. But there they were, human and animal, moving together like they were part of the same pack. We called it in, sealed the scene, and waited for backup. While we waited, I walked the perimeter, reading the story the ground told me. The attack had happened fast, maybe an hour after sunset. The kids never had a chance to run. Whatever hit them came from all sides at once, coordinated, like a military strike. And then I found something that made my blood freeze. Carved into a big oak tree about 8 feet up were symbols. Not random scratches from claws, but deliberate markings. They looked like letters, but not any alphabet I knew. Below them, scratched lower down where a person could reach, were words in English. The mother chooses her children. Backup arrived an hour later. Tom Ashford and Maria Santos, both good rangers with steady nerves. We photographed everything, bagged evidence, and started the grim work of getting the bodies ready for transport. Never seen anything like this, Tom said. He was ex-military, served 2 tours in Afghanistan. Even over there, the worst IED aftermath didn't look this organized. Maria found more of those symbols carved into trees around the campsite, always 8 feet up, always with the same message below. The mother chooses her children. Could be a cult thing, she suggested. Maybe someone's using trained animals, like attack dogs. But I'd seen dog attacks. This wasn't dogs. The bite radius was too wide, the jaw pressure too strong. And dogs don't arrange bodies in ritual patterns. We were loading the last body when Steve found the survivor. She was maybe 50 yards from camp, wedged under a fallen log, covered in leaves and her own blood. 19 years old, blonde hair matted with dirt and worse things. Her name was Jessica Chen, pre-med student from Emory University. Hospital now, Maria said, but Jessica grabbed my arm with surprising strength. You have to listen, she whispered. Her voice was rough, barely audible. It wasn't animals. They used to be people. Just rest, I told her. You're safe now. No. Her grip tightened. She's still out there. The mother. She's choosing new children. She said she could smell the mother's love on you. Jessica's eyes rolled back, and she passed out. We got her to the hospital, but she died during surgery. Blood loss, the doctor said. But her last words kept echoing in my head. She could smell the mother's love on you. The investigation officially became a multiple homicide. State police, FBI, even some federal agents who didn't identify their agency. They took over the scene, locked down the wilderness area, and told us to stay out of their way. But I couldn't let it go. Not when Jessica's words felt like a personal threat. Not when I had a son to protect. That night, I went back to Blood Mountain alone. I parked at the old logging road and hiked in by moonlight, following game trails I'd known for years. The forest felt wrong, too quiet. Even the insects had stopped making noise. I was maybe half a mile from the crime scene when I heard them. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving through the brush in perfect sync. But they didn't sound like boots or shoes. They sounded like bare feet, and something else. Something with claws. I drew my gun and crouched behind a boulder. Through the trees I could see shapes moving. They walked upright like people, but their movements were too fluid, too predatory. In the moonlight I could make out pale skin and dark hair, but their faces were hidden in shadow. They were heading toward the crime scene. I followed, staying downwind, using every tracking skill I'd learned. The shapes moved like ghosts, making no sound except for those synchronized footsteps. There were 6 of them, and they moved in formation like a military unit. At the crime scene, they stopped. One of them, taller than the others, raised her head and howled. Not a human scream, but a wild animal sound that made my teeth ache. The others answered, their voices joining in a harmony that sounded almost like singing. Then they began to change. It started with their hands, fingers stretching, nails growing into claws. Their faces elongated, noses becoming snouts, teeth sharpening into fangs, hair sprouted along their arms and backs. Their bodies twisted and reformed, but they never went down on all fours. They stayed upright, becoming something between human and wolf. The tall one, the leader, sniffed the air. Her head turned directly toward my hiding spot. Her eyes glowed yellow in the darkness, and they were completely human. Intelligent, aware. "Run, little ranger," she said in a voice like gravel and honey. "Run home to your cub. We're not ready for you yet." I didn't need to be told twice. I ran through the forest like a scared rabbit, crashing through brush, stumbling over roots, not caring about noise or stealth. Behind me I could hear laughter. Not cruel laughter, but the warm sound a mother makes when her toddler does something adorable. That was somehow worse than snarls would have been. I made it to my truck and drove home with shaking hands. Tommy was at Jake's house for the week, thank God. I sat in my empty kitchen until dawn, cleaning my gun over and over, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. Werewolves. That was the word I couldn't say out loud, but it was the only thing that fit. Except these weren't the movie monsters I'd grown up with. They were organized, intelligent, and they knew who I was. The next morning I called in sick and drove to the university library in Athens. If there were werewolves in my mountains, maybe someone had written about them. It took 6 hours of digging through old newspapers, folklore collections, and historical records, but I found the pattern. Every 20 to 30 years, going back to the 1800s, there were reports of missing women in the Blood Mountain area. Always mothers, always involved in custody disputes or family problems. The reports would cluster over a few months, then stop completely. And every time, there were stories about wolves. Unusually large wolves that seemed to understand human behavior. The most detailed account was from 1952. A diary entry from a park ranger named William Crawford. The Davidson woman went missing last night. That makes 6 this year, all of them mothers fighting for their children. The Cherokee elder I spoke with warned me not to hunt the pack. He said, "The alpha female was human once, long ago. Lost her babies to a cruel husband. The mountain spirits took pity on her grief and gave her the power to gather new daughters, women who understand a mother's love. He called her Ani Tsaguhi, the wolf mother. Said she builds her pack from broken-hearted mothers, gives them the strength to protect their cubs forever." I should report this, but who would believe it? Besides, maybe she's doing God's work. Every man who's lost his wife to the pack was a wife beater or child abuser. Maybe some monsters are necessary. The diary ended there. William Crawford's body was found a week later, mauled by wolves. His replacement was a man named Jameson, who never mentioned the missing women in any of his reports. I drove home as the sun set, my head spinning with impossible information. Werewolves, a pack mother who recruited abused women, a supernatural force that had been operating in my territory for generations. My phone was ringing when I walked in the door. "Elena, it's Tom Ashford." His voice sounded strange, strained. "I need you to come to the old fire tower on Black Rock Ridge. Now." "Tom, what's wrong?" "Just come alone. And Elena, don't trust anyone else. Not Steve, not Maria, not the feds. Something's happening, and I think they're part of it." The line went dead. Black Rock Ridge was 15 miles north, up a winding dirt road that most people avoided. The fire tower had been abandoned for years, just a rusted metal skeleton against the sky. I loaded extra rounds in my pistol and grabbed my rifle from the gun safe. The moon was full and the forest felt alive with hidden watchers. I found Tom's truck parked at the base of the tower. The driver's door was open, keys still in the ignition. His radio was on the ground, smashed to pieces. "Tom?" I called softly. A low moan came from above. I looked up and nearly dropped my rifle. Tom was hanging from the tower's platform, 30 feet up. But he wasn't dead. He was moving, writhing, his body changing. His arms were getting longer, his face stretching. Even from that distance, I could see his teeth growing into fangs. "Elena!" His voice was barely human now. "Run! She's here! She's—" He screamed, and the sound turned into a howl halfway through. That's when I felt the breath on the back of my neck. "Hello, daughter." I spun around, rifle raised. But she was faster than thought itself. A pale hand knocked the gun from my grip, and another caught me around the throat. Not to hurt, just to hold me still. She was beautiful in the way a storm is beautiful. Tall and strong, with silver white hair and those yellow eyes that seemed to see straight into my soul. She wore no clothes, but her body was covered in fine white fur that made her look more regal than naked. "My name is Lydia Morrison," she said in that honey gravel voice. "I was human once like you. I had children like you. I lost them. Like you're about to. Let me go." She smiled, showing teeth like ivory daggers. "Oh, child, you don't understand. I'm here to help you. Your ex-husband, Jake, he's going to win custody of your boy. The judge has already decided. You know this, don't you? You can feel it in your bones." She was right. I'd known since the first court hearing. Jake had money, connections, a wife who could stay home with Tommy. I was just a ranger with a dangerous job and an irregular schedule. "But I can give you the power to protect your cub forever," Lydia continued. "Join my pack and you'll never lose another child. You'll never be weak again. You'll never have to beg some man in a robe to let you love your own son." Above us, Tom's transformation was complete. He dropped from the tower, landing on all fours but immediately standing upright. His face was wolf-like now, but his eyes were still human. Still Tom. "She's right, Elena," he said, his voice a rough growl. "I have 3 kids. My ex-wife was going to move them to California, take them away from me forever. But now I'm strong enough to protect them, strong enough to make sure they're never hurt." "By killing people?" Lydia stroked my cheek with one clawed finger. "We kill those who would harm children, abusive fathers, neglectful mothers, predators who wear human faces. The college students were camping on sacred ground, drinking and fornicating where my daughters are buried. They needed to be removed. And Jessica, she was just a kid herself. Jessica was chosen to deliver my message to you. Her death was gentle, a gift, really. She'll never have to face the disappointments of adulthood. The casual way she said it made my stomach turn. But part of me, the part that lay awake nights worrying about Tommy, about losing him, about not being strong enough to protect him, that part whispered that maybe she was right. I need time to think. Of course, daughter, but don't take too long. Your son's class is going camping next week. Blood Mountain Wilderness. And my pack is so very hungry. The threat hit me like a physical blow. Tommy's school camping trip. I'd forgotten about it. If you hurt him, I would never hurt a child, Elena. But I can't control what other dangers might find him. The mountains are full of predators, bears, mountain lions, men with bad intentions. Her smile was sharp as winter. Unless, of course, his mother was strong enough to protect him, strong enough to run with the pack. She stepped back, releasing me. You have 3 days to decide. 3 days before the moon is dark and my daughters grow restless. Choose wisely, Elena Ravencrest. Choose for your cub. Then she was gone, vanishing into the shadows like she'd never been there. Tom lingered for a moment longer. Elena, he said, his wolf features making the words difficult. She's not evil. She's just a mother. Like you. Like me. Think about it. Then he too disappeared, leaving me alone by the rusted tower with the taste of fear sharp in my mouth. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove to Jake's house and sat in my truck across the street, watching the windows. Tommy's bedroom light was on. He was probably doing homework or reading one of his adventure books, completely unaware that monsters were discussing his future. Jake's new wife, Cindy, walked past the window, blonde, pretty, probably never spent a night wondering if she was strong enough to protect her family. She lived in a world where the biggest dangers were traffic accidents and seasonal flu. I envied her. My phone rang. It was Steve. Elena, where are you? Tom's missing, and there's blood at the fire tower. The feds are going crazy. I'm fine, Steve. I'm taking some personal time. This isn't the time for personal problems. There's a killer out there, maybe a whole group of them. You need to... Steve? I interrupted. Do you have kids? What? Yeah, 2 daughters. Elena, what does that have to do with... What would you do to protect them? I mean really protect them. If someone was going to take them away, hurt them, what would you do? There was a long pause. Anything, he said finally. I'd do anything. Even if it meant becoming something you never thought you could be. Elena, you're scaring me. Where are you? I hung up. The next 2 days were the longest of my life. I researched everything I could find about lycanthropy, about the Blood Mountain Pack, about Lydia Morrison. The human record stopped in 1923 when she was reported missing along with her 2 young children. Her husband claimed they'd gone to visit relatives and never returned, but newspaper accounts hinted at darker rumors. Stories about screaming in the night, about neighbors calling the police for domestic disturbances. The records from the Cherokee Reservation were more detailed. The tribal elders spoke of Anitsaguhi, the wolf mother, who had been blessed by the mountain spirits after losing her cubs to a cruel mate. They said she was neither good nor evil, Burish, necessary, a force that maintained balance by protecting the innocent and punishing the guilty. But their protection came with a price. On the second night, I dreamed about Tommy. He was older, maybe 16, standing in a courtroom as a judge told him his mother had been declared unfit, that he would never see me again. In the dream, he cried and reached for me, but bailiffs held him back while Jake and Cindy led him away. I woke up with claws. They were small, just barely extended past my fingernails, but they were real, sharp and curved and completely impossible. I ran to the bathroom mirror and saw that my eyes had flecks of gold in them. My teeth seemed a little sharper. The change had already begun. That morning, Jake called. Elena, we need to talk about Tommy. What about him? The camping trip is canceled. Some kind of security concern in the wilderness area. But I'm taking him anyway, just the 2 of us. Father-son bonding. His voice had a smug satisfaction that made my blood boil. Maybe we'll discuss his future living arrangements. Jake, don't you dare. What are you going to do about it? You're too busy playing soldier in the woods to be a real mother. This is exactly why the judge is going to give me custody. He hung up. I sat there for a long time, looking at my hands. The claws had retracted, but I could feel them under the skin, waiting. Part of me was horrified at what was happening to my body. But another part, the part that had spent 10 years watching my ex-husband manipulate and control and threaten, that part was glad. I had always been strong, but now I could be stronger. That evening I drove back to Blood Mountain. I didn't have to look for them this time. They were waiting for me at the old crime scene, 6 figures standing in a circle around the cold fire pit. They'd built a new fire, and in the flickering light they looked most human. I knew you'd come, Lydia said. She was in human form now, wearing simple jeans and a flannel shirt, looking like any middle-aged woman you might meet at a grocery store. You've felt it, haven't you? The change beginning. What did you do to me? Nothing you didn't choose. The mountain spirits don't force their gifts on anyone. You have to want it. You have to need it. She gestured to the others around the fire. Meet your sisters, Elena. Each of them faced the same choice you're facing now. They introduced themselves one by one. Sarah, whose abusive husband had beaten her so badly she lost her unborn child. Marie, whose ex-husband had kidnapped their daughter and disappeared. Jennifer, whose son had been molested by his stepfather while she worked 2 jobs to keep them fed. All mothers, all fighters, all women who had been failed by a system that was supposed to protect them. We're not monsters, Sarah said. Her voice was warm, motherly. We're just mothers who refuse to be victims anymore. The college students were trespassing on sacred ground, Marie interrupted. This is our territory now, our sanctuary. We have to protect it. And the men you kill? Child abusers, wife beaters, predators. Jennifer spat into the fire. The world is better without them. But Tom Ashford isn't any of those things. No, Lydia agreed. Tom is packed now. He chose to join us to protect his children, just like you're going to choose. She reached into a bag by her feet and pulled out a small digital camera. Your ex-husband and your son are camping at Miller's Creek tonight, about 5 miles north of here. Jake brought some interesting reading material, and he's been drinking. She turned on the camera and showed me the display. It was a video shot from somewhere in the trees above a small campsite. Jake was indeed drinking, a bottle of whiskey on the picnic table beside him. Tommy was in his sleeping bag by the fire, already asleep. And scattered around Jake were magazines, pornographic magazines featuring young girls who looked bearless. Illegal. He's grooming your son, Elena. Starting slow with pictures. Soon it will be touching. Then worse. Lydia's voice was gentle, sympathetic. You know this. You've suspected for months. That's why you fought so hard for custody. She was right. I had suspected. The way Jake looked at Tommy sometimes, the inappropriate comments, the insistence on private father-son time that Tommy always seemed uncomfortable discussing. But human courts won't act on suspicions, Lydia continued. They need proof, evidence. By the time they have enough proof, your son will be damaged beyond repair. I watched the video feed as Jake took another drink and picked up one of the magazines. What do I have to do? Come with us. Now. Stop him before he hurts your cub. And when you taste his blood, when you feel his life end between your teeth, the transformation will be complete. You'll be pack. You'll be family. You'll never lose another child. The other women were already changing. Clothes falling away, bodies stretching and reforming. But they kept their human faces, human eyes. The change wasn't a curse for them. It was liberation. Elena, Lydia said, her own transformation beginning. What kind of mother are you going to be? I thought about Tommy, asleep and vulnerable next to a man who wanted to hurt him. I thought about custody hearings and judges who believed predators over protective mothers. I thought about being strong enough to keep my son safe, no matter what it cost. I closed my eyes and let the change take me. The transformation hurt, but not in the way I expected. It felt like shedding skin that had always been too tight, like finally allowing myself to be what I was meant to be. My senses exploded. I could smell Jake's whiskey and arousal from miles away, could hear Tommy's steady heartbeat, could taste the fierce scent of small animals fleeing our approach. We moved through the forest like shadows, 6 mothers on the hunt. I was surprised by how natural it felt, how right. This was what I'd always been underneath. A protector, a predator, a force of nature defending her young. Jake never heard us coming. We surrounded the campsite in perfect silence. Tommy was still asleep, thank God. He didn't need to see this. Jake was sitting by the fire, magazine in one hand, bottle in the other, his eyes unfocused with drink and sick fantasies. Lydia nodded to me. This was my hunt, my choice. I stepped into the firelight. Jake looked up, squinting. Elena? What the hell are you doing here? And what? His eyes focused on my changed face, my claws, my predator's smile. Jesus Christ. Hello, Jake. He scrambled backward, dropping the bottle. This isn't real. This isn't possible. You're right. It's not possible for the woman you knew. But I'm not her anymore. I moved closer, savoring his terror. I'm the mother Tommy needs. The mother you tried to take away from him. Elena, please. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I couldn't smell the sickness on you? I gestured to the magazines scattered around his chair. Planning to share those with our son Jake? Start his education early? It's not what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like. The growl in my voice made him whimper. You're a predator, and I'm designed to hunt predators. What happened next was brutal and quick and necessary. When it was over, Jake was gone, and the forest was claiming his remains. The pack disposed of the evidence with practiced efficiency, while I washed the blood from my hands in the creek. Tommy never woke up. In the morning I would report that Jake had fallen into the rapids while night fishing. An accident. Tragic, but these things happen in the wilderness. The magazines would never be found. Lydia's pack had connections in the sheriff's department, sisters who understood the value of protecting children from uncomfortable truths. I would get full custody. No one would question a grieving widow's right to raise her son. How do you feel? Lydia asked as we watched the sunrise. I considered the question. I felt strong. I felt complete. I felt like I could protect Tommy from anything the world might throw at him. Like a mother, I said. The pack welcomed me home. That was 3 years ago. Tommy is 13 now, and he's never been safer or happier. He thinks his father died in a tragic accident, and that his mother got lucky with the custody ruling. He doesn't need to know the truth. Not yet. I'm still a park ranger, officially, but my real job is much more important. I help other mothers find their way to the pack. Mothers in impossible situations, mothers who've been failed by the system, mothers who need to be stronger than human law allows. We're not monsters. We're just women who refuse to let our children be hurt. The pack has grown to nearly 30 members now. We control 3 national forests, and the government has learned not to ask too many questions about what happens in our territory. Missing persons reports get filed and forgotten. Abusive husbands take hiking trips and never come home. The world is safer for children because of us. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd made a different choice that night. If I'd trusted the human system to protect Tommy, trusted judges and lawyers and social workers to see what Jake really was. But then I look at my son, strong, confident, protected, and I know I chose correctly. The pack mother takes care of her children, all of them, forever. My name is Bill Ashcroft, and I never wanted to see another coal mine as long as I lived. But life has a funny way of dragging you back to the places that hurt you most. Here I was, 12 years into my job as a forest ranger, and half my time was spent checking on old mine sites scattered through Jefferson National Forest. Every rusted gate and warning sign reminded me why I'd left that life behind. The call came in on a Tuesday morning in October. Some college kids from Virginia Tech had gone missing while doing a geological survey up on Black Damp Mountain. Their professor was worried sick. They'd been due back 3 days ago. I knew that mountain well. Too well. The old Black Damp mine had been shut down since 1892, but the shafts were still there, hidden under 60 years of overgrowth. Kids love to explore those places, and kids love to get themselves killed doing it. I grabbed my gear and headed up the mountain, my boots crunching through dead leaves that carpeted the trail. The October air was crisp and clean, nothing like the thick, choking dust I remembered from my mining days. But even now, 13 years after the accident, I could still taste coal dust when I thought too hard about the old days. My daddy and my 2 brothers, Jake and Tommy, they'd all died in that cave-in at Millfield Mine back in '42. I was the only one who made it out, crawling through spaces so tight I had to breathe out just to squeeze through. 23 years old, covered in my family's blood and coal dust, swearing I'd never go underground again. That's why I became a ranger. Fresh air, open sky, and the chance to keep other people from making the same mistakes that killed my family. Most days it felt like honest work. Today wasn't one of those days. The Black Damp mine entrance wasn't hard to find. I'd been there plenty of times, checking the safety barriers and warning signs, and what was hard was seeing those barriers had been cut clean through. Someone had taken bolt cutters to the chain link fence, and the padlock on the main shaft gate was lying in the dirt, cut in half. College kids, I thought, always thinking they know better than the signs that say, "Danger, keep out." I called out as I approached the mine entrance. "Hello? Anybody down there? This is Ranger Ashcroft." My voice echoed off the stone walls and came back empty. The mine shaft disappeared into darkness about 20 feet in, and I could feel that familiar cold air flowing out. The breath of the mountain, my daddy used to call it. It always smelled like metal and wet rock and something else I could never quite name. That's when I saw the first body. It was one of the college kids lying just inside the entrance where the sunlight barely reached. But something was wrong with him. Real wrong. His skin had a gray, dusty look to it, like he'd been rolled in coal powder. When I knelt down to check for a pulse, his skin felt rough and gritty under my fingers. He was breathing. Shallow, quick breaths that made a sound like wind through gravel. His eyes were open and moving, tracking my face as I leaned over him. But when I tried to talk to him, he couldn't answer. His mouth opened and closed, but all that came out was a soft, scraping sound like rocks rubbing together. I'd seen a lot of mining accidents in my time. Cave-ins, gas explosions, men crushed by falling equipment. But I'd never seen anything like this. The boy's skin wasn't just gray. It was hard, like stone. When I touched his arm, it felt more like touching a statue than a person. But he was still alive, still aware. The terror in his eyes told me that much. I radioed for help, but the mountain played hell with radio signals. All I got back was static and the echo of my own voice. I was on my own, at least until I would get back down the mountain to call for backup. That's when I heard the sound from deeper in the mine. A low rumbling, like machinery starting up. But that was impossible. This mine had been dead for 60 years. There was no power, no equipment, nothing but empty shafts and bad air. The rumbling got louder, and I could swear I heard voices mixed in with it. Men's voices, singing something that sounded like a work song. The kind of songs miners used to sing to keep time while they worked. I looked down at the gray-skinned college kid, and his eyes were wide with panic. He was trying to move, trying to get away from that sound, but his body wouldn't respond. Whatever had happened to him had left him trapped in his own skin. "Easy now," I whispered, though I wasn't sure he could hear me. "I'm going to get you out of here." But even as I said it, I could feel something pulling at me, drawing me toward that darkness. The same darkness that had taken my family 13 years ago. The same darkness that had been calling to me in my dreams ever since. I should have carried that boy out of there right then. Should have run down the mountain and called the state police and the fire department and anyone else who'd listen. But the sound of those voices kept pulling at me, and I knew there were 3 more kids somewhere in that darkness. I grabbed my flashlight and started into the mine, leaving the gray-skinned boy in the sunlight. At least there, he'd be safe from whatever was happening deeper down. The main tunnel stretched ahead, supported by old wooden beams that groaned under the weight of the mountain. My light cut through the darkness about 30 feet before it got swallowed up. The air was thick and heavy, but not with the gas that usually made old mines dangerous. This was something else, something that made my skin crawl and my teeth itch. About 50 yards in, I found the second student. She was standing against the wall like she was waiting for a bus, but she wasn't moving. When I called out to her, she turned her head toward me with a motion so slow it looked like she was moving underwater. Her skin had that same gray, rocky look as the boy outside, but it was worse. Parts of her face looked like they were made of actual coal, black and shiny. Her mouth moved when she saw me, and I thought she was trying to say something. But what came out wasn't words. It was a sound like grinding stone, harsh and grating. She raised one hand toward me, and I could see her fingers had turned completely black, like chunks of coal shaped into the form of a hand. "What happened to you?" I whispered. She made that grinding sound again, and this time I caught something that might have been words. "Help. Us." Before I could reach her, the rumbling sound started up again, louder this time. It was coming from deeper in the mine, and with it came that work song. Men's voices singing in harmony about digging deep and working hard and never seeing the sun again. The girl's coal-black eyes went wide with fear, and she started shaking her head back and forth. "No," she managed to say, the word coming out like gravel falling down a metal chute. "Don't let him." Then she couldn't talk anymore. The coal spread across her face like paint, covering her mouth and nose. But her eyes stayed human, stayed terrified, even as the rest of her turned to stone. I tried to grab her, tried to pull her toward the entrance, but she was too heavy. Her body had become solid rock, and I couldn't budge her. She was trapped there, alive but helpless, watching me with eyes that begged me to save her. The work song got louder, and I could hear footsteps echoing through the tunnels. Lots of footsteps, all in perfect time with the rhythm of the song. They were getting closer. I left the girl there. I had to. There was nothing else I could do. And pushed deeper into the mine. My flashlight beam bounced off the walls as I moved, and I started seeing things that made no sense. Tool marks in the stone that looked fresh, even though this mine had been empty for 60 years. Sections of tunnel that had been expanded, carved out by hand with impossible precision. And everywhere, scattered through the dirt and gravel, were chunks of coal that glittered in my flashlight beam. But when I knelt down to look closer, I could see they weren't normal coal. They had patterns in them, swirls and lines that looked almost like faces. That's when I found the main chamber. The tunnel opened up into a space so big my flashlight couldn't find the far walls. But I could hear them. Hundreds of voices singing that work song, the sound echoing off stone walls that stretched up into darkness. And I could see lights moving in the distance, lanterns or torches that cast dancing shadows on the walls. I switched off my flashlight and crept forward, using the wall to guide me. As my eyes adjusted, I could make out shapes moving in the darkness. Lots of shapes, all human-sized, all moving with the same slow, deliberate rhythm. Then I saw the source of the light. In the center of the chamber, something huge was glowing with a dull red light, like the embers of a dying fire. It was long and serpentine, coiled around itself like a sleeping snake. But it was made of coal and metal, its body covered in the gears and pistons and conveyor belts of mining equipment. Steam hissed from joints where flesh met machinery. And its eyes, God help me, it had eyes, burned like furnaces in a face that was part dragon and part steam engine. The Coal King. Even though I'd never heard the name before, I knew that's what it was. It was sleeping or resting, and around it hundreds of figures moved in perfect formation. Men in mining clothes, carrying picks and shovels, singing as they worked. But they moved wrong, like puppets on strings, and their skin had that same gray, rocky look I'd seen in the college students. I recognized some of the faces. My daddy was there, still wearing the clothes he'd died in 13 years ago. He looked exactly the same, except his skin was the color of coal dust and his eyes glowed with a faint red light. He was swinging a pickaxe in perfect time with the others, and his voice was part of that terrible work song. Jake was there too, and Tommy, my brothers, dead and gone but still working, still trapped in this place that had killed them. They looked happy, in a way, content, like they'd finally found their purpose. One of the college kids, a boy with sandy hair, was standing near the edge of the group. His transformation wasn't complete yet. Half his face was still human, still terrified. He saw me watching and tried to scream, but only that grinding, rocky sound came out. That's when the Coal King opened its eyes. They fixed on me instantly, burning like headlights in the darkness. The work song stopped, and hundreds of coal-transformed faces turned to look at me. The silence was worse than the singing. "William Ashcroft," the Coal King said, its voice like a steam engine and a landslide having a conversation. "I have been waiting for you. I should have run. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to turn around and sprint for the entrance, but I couldn't move. Those burning eyes held me like a deer in headlights, and something about the way it said my name, like it had been expecting me all along, froze my blood. "You don't remember me," the Coal King continued, uncoiling itself from the center of the chamber. It was massive, easily 60 feet long, its body a horrible fusion of dragon scales and mining machinery. Steam leaked from joints where organic parts met metal, and coal dust fell from its hide like black snow. "But I remember you, the boy who escaped, the one who got away." The transformed miners parted as it moved, making a clear path between us. My daddy stepped aside with the others, his coal-black face showing no recognition. He just kept staring straight ahead, and with those glowing red eyes. "You see, William," the Coal King said, moving closer with each word, "I was there the day your family died. I caused that cave-in. I needed workers, and they were strong men, good workers. But you slipped away before I could claim you." The memory hit me like a physical blow. That day in Millfield Mine, when the ceiling came down. I'd been working a seam about 50 yards from my family when I heard the rumbling start. Not the normal settling of rock, but something else, something that sounded almost like breathing. "I felt you crawling through those spaces," the Coal King continued, "squeezing through gaps barely wide enough for a child. Such determination, such will to live. I knew then that you would be special, worth waiting for." I found my voice finally. "You killed them." "I saved them," the Coal King corrected, and there was genuine warmth in its furnace voice. "Look at them, William. Really look." I turned to where my daddy stood with the others. His face was gray stone now, but there was something in his expression that I hadn't seen since I was a kid. Peace, contentment, the deep satisfaction of a man who'd found his calling. "No more pain," the Coal King said. "No more worry about bills or food or whether there'll be work tomorrow. No more watching their bodies break down from years of hard labor. They are perfect now, eternal, part of something bigger than themselves." Jake stepped forward, my younger brother who died at 25. His voice came out like gravel in a mixer, but I could still hear him in it. "Billy, you came back." I wanted to reach for him, but something held me back. Maybe it was the way his eyes glowed or the way coal dust fell from his skin with every movement. This wasn't really Jake anymore. It was something wearing Jake's face. "The surface world is dying, William," the Coal King said. "Wars and poverty and men killing each other over scraps. But here, underground, we have built something perfect. A society where everyone has a purpose, where no one is hungry or tired or afraid. Aid. All I ask in return is service." The fourth college student, a girl with dark hair, was standing near Tommy. Her transformation was about halfway complete, her left side still human, while her right side had turned to living coal. She looked at me with desperate eyes and mouthed one word. Help. She still fights it, the Coal King observed. The young ones often do. They cling to their old lives, their old fears. But in time, she will understand. They always do. I realized I was still holding my flashlight, though I hadn't turned it on since entering the chamber. The Coal King's red glow provided all the light we needed. I could see everything. The hundreds of transformed workers, the mining equipment that moved on its own, the rails that stretched off into tunnels I hadn't known existed. This is bigger than just this mine, I said. The Coal King's massive head moved in what might have been a nod. Much bigger. Every abandoned mine in these mountains is connected now. A network of tunnels and chambers stretching across 3 states, and in each one my workers continue their eternal labor. It gestured with one massive claw, and I heard the sound of machinery starting up in the distance. Conveyor belts and drilling equipment, all running without electricity or diesel fuel, all powered by something else. Souls burn cleaner than coal, the Coal King explained, and they last so much longer. One transformed worker can power my operations for decades, centuries even. That's what you want from me, I said. You want to turn me into one of them. I want to give you what you've been searching for since the day you crawled out of that cave-in, the Coal King replied. Purpose, belonging, an end to the guilt that eats at you every night when you wonder why you lived when they died. It was right, and that scared me more than anything else. The survivor's guilt had been eating at me for 13 years. Every morning when I woke up, every quiet moment when I wasn't distracted by work, the question was there. Why me? Why did I get to live when better, men than me, died in the dark? Join us, William, my daddy said, his voice like wind through a graveyard. Join your family. The partially transformed college girl made another desperate sound, trying to warn me away. But it was getting harder to resist. The Coal King's presence filled the chamber like heat from a furnace, and I could feel it working on my mind, showing me images of what life could be like here. No more loneliness. No more guilt. No more lying awake at night wondering if I was a coward for running instead of staying to help. What about the people on the surface? I asked. My job, the other rangers, the families of these students. What about them? The Coal King replied. You've spent 12 years trying to save people from places like this. How many have you actually saved, William? How many lives have you really improved? The question hit home because I'd asked it myself too many times. For every hiker I'd guided to safety, for every accident I'd prevented, there were always more people making the same mistakes. More kids dying in abandoned mines, more families torn apart by the mountain's hidden dangers. Here, your work would matter, the Coal King continued. Here, you would be part of something eternal, something that grows stronger every day. I could feel myself weakening, feel the Coal King's influence creeping into my thoughts like smoke. The red glow was getting brighter, and the transformed workers were moving closer, surrounding me in a circle of gray faces and glowing eyes. That's when I heard it. A sound from back toward the entrance. A voice calling my name. Human voices, alive and untransformed. The rescue team had finally arrived. The sound of living voices broke the Coal King's spell like cold water on a fire. I snapped back to myself, remembering why I was here and what I had to do. But the Coal King's massive head swung toward the entrance, and its furnace eyes burned brighter with anger. More workers, it said, and there was hunger in its voice. How thoughtful of you to bring them to me. The transformed miners started moving, not toward me anymore, but toward the tunnel that led to the surface. They moved in perfect formation, like soldiers marching to war. My daddy was among them, and Jake and Tommy, their faces blank and purposeful. No! I shouted, but my voice was lost in the sound of hundreds of feet moving across stone. The Coal King laughed, a sound like a steam engine exploding. Did you think you could resist me forever, William? Did you think you could save everyone? You couldn't even save your own family. The words hit me like a physical blow, but they also cleared my head. This thing had killed my family, had turned them into slaves, and now it wanted to do the same to whoever had come looking for me. I ran. Not away from the Coal King, but toward it. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I wasn't thinking at all. But I couldn't let it hurt anyone else. Couldn't let more families be destroyed the way mine had been. The Coal King reared back as I approached, surprised by my charge. Its massive jaws opened, revealing teeth like broken mining equipment and a throat that glowed like the inside of a furnace. Steam hissed from its nostrils, and the stench of sulfur filled the air. "You want me!" I yelled, still running straight at it. "You've been waiting 13 years for me. Well, here I am." I jumped, aiming for what might have been its throat, but one of its claws caught me in midair and slammed me to the ground. The impact drove the air from my lungs and sent my flashlight spinning away into the darkness. But I wasn't done yet. I rolled aside as another claw came down where my head had been, leaving gouges in the stone floor. The Coal King was fast, but it was also, huge. And huge things have trouble with small, quick targets. I scrambled between its legs, looking for something vulnerable, some weakness I could exploit. That's when I saw them. Cables. And pipes running from the Coal King's body into the walls of the chamber. It wasn't just sitting here. It was connected to the entire mine system. This was its heart, its command center. If I could damage the connection somehow. I pulled out my ranger knife, a 5-inch blade that seemed pathetically small against the monster looming over me. But it was all I had. I started sawing at one of the cables, hoping it would do something, anything, to slow the Coal King down. The cable sparked when I cut through it, and the Coal King roared in pain and anger. Some of the transformed workers stumbled, their perfect formation breaking as whatever controlled them flickered. "Stop!" the Coal King bellowed, swinging its massive head down toward me. I dove aside, and its jaws closed on empty air. "You don't understand what you're doing. Without me, they'll all die. They'll turn back to corpses, and your family will be lost forever." I hesitated, my knife halfway through another cable. Was that true? Would cutting these connections kill my daddy and brothers all over again? "Billy!" Jake's voice, clearer now, more human. "Billy, do it. Cut us loose." I looked up to see my brother standing at the edge of the chamber, his gray face twisted with effort. The Coal King's control was weakening, and Jake was fighting it, trying to break free. "We ain't living, Billy," he said, his voice growing stronger. "This ain't living. Let us go." "You can't," the Coal King snarled, turning its attention to Jake. "You belong to me. You all belong to me." But other voices were joining in now. Tommy and my daddy and dozens of other transformed workers. The college students, too, their half-changed faces showing human emotion again. "Free us," they pleaded. "Please let us rest." I cut through the second cable, and the Coal King's roar shook dust from the ceiling. More workers broke free of its conning, trolls stumbling around like people waking from a long dream. Some of them were starting to crumble, their coal-transformed bodies beginning to fall apart as whatever force animated them failed. "William!" The Coal King's voice was desperate now. "Stop this! I can give you everything you've ever wanted. Your family back, your guilt gone, a purpose that will last forever." I looked at my daddy one more time. He was starting to fade, his gray skin becoming translucent. But he was smiling, really smiling, for the first time since I'd seen him down here. "I'm proud of you, son," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You did good. You saved us." I cut through the third cable. The Coal King's scream split the air like breaking stone. Its massive body convulsed, coal dust and steam erupting from its joints. The red glow in its eyes flickered and dimmed, and all around the chamber, the transformed workers were collapsing back into the dust they should have been decades ago. The mine started shaking. Without the Coal King's power holding everything together, 60 years of geological pressure was reasserting itself. Rocks fell from the ceiling, and I could hear the wooden supports groaning under the strain. I ran for the tunnel, following my own footsteps back toward the entrance. Behind me, the Coal King's dying roars echoed through the collapsing mine, and with them came the sound of my family finally finding peace. I made it out just as the main shaft collapsed. The rescue team, 3 other rangers and a couple of state troopers, pulled me away from the entrance as tons of rock came crashing down. The sound echoed across the mountain like thunder, and when it finally stopped, there was nothing left but a pile of rubble where the mine entrance used to be. They found the first college student where I'd left him, still alive but unconscious. The gray color was fading from his skin, and by the time the paramedics got him to the hospital, he looked almost normal, traumatized and confused, but human. The other 3 were never found. Officially, they were listed as victims of a mine collapse, buried somewhere in the tunnels under Black Mountain. Their families held memorial services and tried to move on. I never told anyone what really happened to them. Who would have believed me? But I know they're at peace now. They have to be. Along with my daddy and Jake and Tommy and all the others who spent so many years trapped in the Coal King service. When I cut those cables, I felt them go. Felt their souls finally moving on to whatever comes next. I kept working as a ranger for another 5 years, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. How do you go back to checking campsites and issuing permits when you've seen what's really hiding in these mountains? When you know that sometimes the old stories are true, and the things that go bump in the night have names and faces and appetites? I retired early and moved to Florida, as far from the Appalachian Mountains as I could get. Bought a little house near the beach where the air smells like salt instead of coal dust. Most days I can almost forget about what happened up on Black Mountain. But sometimes when the wind is right and I'm feeling nostalgic, I swear I can still hear them. Voices singing work songs in the darkness, the sound of picks hitting stone, the rumble of machinery that shouldn't exist. Not from Florida. The sound travels further than that. It comes from every mountain range, every place where men have dug too deep and disturbed things that should have stayed buried. The Coal King is dead, but it wasn't the only one. There are other things sleeping in the depths, other bargains being made between the desperate and the hungry. And someday, another ranger or miner or foolish college student is going to stumble into the wrong tunnel and find themselves face to face with something that offers them everything they've ever wanted. All they have to do is give up their soul. I just hope that when it happens, they're stronger than I almost was. I hope they remember that some prices are too high to pay, no matter how much you want what's being offered. And I hope they remember that sometimes the only way to save someone is to let them go. My name is David Ashworth, and I've been a park ranger at Cumberland Gap for 9 years now. Most people think my job is just about keeping hikers safe and making sure nobody feeds the bears. But what I really love is the history hidden in these mountains. I'm not a big guy, just 5'9" with brown hair that never stays neat no matter how much I comb it. My wife always says I look more like a college professor than a ranger, and she's probably right. I carry a beat-up notebook everywhere, writing down stories the old folks tell me about their families in the mountains. That's how I first heard about the Melungeons. If you don't know about them, the Melungeons were mixed-race people who lived in these mountains way back in the 1800s. White, black, Native American, all mixed together. Back then, that made life really hard for them. People didn't know what to make of them, so they treated them bad, real bad. Some families got so tired of the hate that they moved deeper into the mountains, as far away from other people as they could get. That's how Lost Mountain got its name, because that's where the lost people went. I started my research in September, when the leaves were just starting to turn. Perfect weather for hiking up to the old homesteads. I'd been talking to elderly folks in the valleys, collecting their family stories for the park's historical records. That's when I met Mrs. Vera Collins. She was 89 years old, tiny as a bird, but her memory was sharp as a knife. "You want to know about the Melungeons?" she asked, rocking in her chair on the front porch. "My great-grandmama was one, used to tell me stories that'd curl your hair." She poured me sweet tea and started talking about her family. Normal stuff at first. Who married who, where they lived, how they made their living. But then she got quiet. "There were some that went to the shadows," she said, not looking at me. Up on Lost Mountain. Went there after the Troubles in 1894, and nobody saw them again. Not properly, anyway. What kind of troubles? I asked, pen ready. Bad men came. Said the Melungeons didn't belong nowhere. Not with white folks, not with black folks, not with the Indians. Said they were going to make sure they understood that. Her voice got smaller. Some families just disappeared after that. People said they went to Lost Mountain to hide, but what? But my great-grandmama, she said they didn't just hide. She said they went to the shadows, between this world and the next, where the bad men couldn't follow. I wrote it all down, but I didn't believe it. I'm a historian, not a ghost story collector. People make up stories to explain things they don't understand. Families probably just moved west or changed their names. But Mrs. Collins wasn't done. You go up to Lost Mountain, young man. You might see them yourself. The shadow people. Still there. Still waiting. Waiting for what? For somebody to tell their story right. For somebody to remember what really happened up there. I drove home that evening thinking about what she'd said. Shadow people. That was just mountain superstition, right? But something about the way she'd talked, so serious and sad, stuck with me. That night I pulled out my maps and found Lost Mountain. It was about a 3-hour hike from the nearest road, way up in the wilderness area where most tourists never go. Perfect place for families to hide if they needed to. I decided I'd hike up there in a few days, see what I could find. Maybe some old cabin foundations, a family cemetery, something concrete for my research. I figured I'd find ruins and nothing else. I was wrong about that. 3 days later, I started up the trail to Lost Mountain before dawn. The air was crisp and clean, and my breath made little clouds or two. In the cool morning, I had my camera, my notebook, and enough food for the day. Just a simple research trip. The trail was overgrown, but still there, winding up through oak and maple trees that were just starting to show their fall colors. About 2 hours in, I found the first sign that people had lived up here. An old stone wall, mostly fallen down, but definitely man-made. I took pictures and made notes. The stonework looked like it was from the 1800s, fitted together without mortar the way mountain people used to build. Behind the wall, I could see foundation stones scattered through the underbrush. "Hello there," I called out, though I didn't expect an answer. Sometimes hunters or hikers were in the area, and I always liked to announce myself. "Park ranger coming through." Nothing but birds and wind in the trees. I climbed over the wall and started exploring. There were definitely ruins here. Not just one cabin, but a whole little settlement. Foundation stones, pieces of chimneys, even an old well with stones piled around it. This had been a real community once. As I walked around taking pictures, I noticed something odd. The temperature felt different here, not just cooler because of the shade, actually cold, like walking into a refrigerator. Even when I stood in direct sunlight, the air felt chilly against my skin. I checked my thermometer. It read 48 degrees. Down in the valley that morning, it had been 65. Strange, but not impossible. Mountain microclimates can be weird. Higher altitude, different airflow. There were lots of reasons it might be cooler up here. I spent most of the morning exploring and documenting the ruins. Found pieces of pottery, some old horseshoes, even part of a plow blade. People had definitely lived here, and not just camping. This had been their home. Around noon, I sat down on a fallen log to eat my sandwich and review my notes. That's when I heard it. Voices. Not loud and not clear enough to make out words. Just the sound of people talking somewhere in the distance. A man's voice, deeper. A woman's voice, higher. Maybe children, too. I stood up and looked around. "Hello?" I called. "Anyone there?" The voices stopped. I waited a few minutes, listening hard, but heard nothing except normal forest sounds. Probably just hikers on another trail, sound carrying funny through the trees. But when I pulled out my camera to take more pictures, something was wrong with it. The display was flickering, and when I tried to take a shot, nothing happened. The battery showed full, but the camera wouldn't work. I tried my backup camera. Same problem. Now that was definitely weird. Both cameras working fine that morning, both dead now? I checked the batteries, tried different settings, even whacked them a couple times like that might help. Nothing. I put the cameras away and decided to finish my exploration without them. I could always come back another day with working equipment. That's when I saw the first shadow. I was examining what looked like the foundation of a church or meeting house when movement caught my eye. Just for a second, I could have sworn I saw someone walking between the trees about 50 yards away. "Hey!" I shouted. "Park ranger! You folks okay over there?" No answer. I walked toward where I'd seen the movement, but there was nobody there, just trees and underbrush and scattered stones. But the weird thing was, the leaves on the ground looked different. Like someone had been walking there recently, but the footprints weren't clear. Just a disturbed look to the forest floor. I knelt down and looked closer. The leaves were definitely disturbed, but not in a normal way. They were arranged in a pattern that didn't make sense. Too neat, like someone had carefully placed them. Standing up, I got that feeling you get when someone's watching you. You know the one, the little prickle on the back of your neck that makes you want to turn around. I turned around. Nothing there. Just ruins and trees and that strange, cold air. But I could swear I smelled something. Wood smoke, faint but definite. Like someone had a fire going somewhere nearby. I looked around for smoke, but didn't see any. Listened for the crackle of burning wood, but heard nothing. The smell got stronger. Now I was getting genuinely spooked. Cameras not working, cold spots, voices with no people, disturbed leaves, and now phantom wood smoke? My scientific mind tried to find explanations, but I was running out of logical reasons for all this weirdness. I decided to call it a day. I'd gotten plenty of information about the settlement, enough to start my research. I could always come back with better equipment and maybe another person. As I packed up my gear, I heard the voices again. Clearer this time, close enough that I should have been able to see who was talking. A man saying something that sounded like, "Told you they'd come looking." A woman answering, "Not ready yet. Still too soon." And then, clear as anything, a child's voice. "Why can't they see us, Mama?" I froze. That was definitely a little kid, no more than 20 feet away from me. I looked everywhere but saw nothing. "Hello?" I called out, louder this time. "I'm a park ranger. If you're lost or need help, please answer me." The voices stopped instantly, like someone had turned off a radio. I waited 5 full minutes, but heard nothing else. The wood smoke smell faded away. Even the cold feeling in the air seemed to warm up a little. I hiked back down the mountain faster than I'd come up, checking over my shoulder the whole way. When I got to my truck, both cameras worked perfectly again. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd experienced. The logical part of my mind said it was just a weird day. Equipment problems, sounds carrying from somewhere else, maybe a little altitude sickness making me imagine things. But that child's voice kept echoing in my head. "Why can't they see us, Mama?" Like we were the ones who were invisible. I couldn't stay away. 3 days later, I was back on Moss, the mountain, this time with fresh batteries, backup equipment, and a digital voice recorder. If something strange was happening up there, I was going to document it properly. The hike up seemed different this time, quieter. Even the birds weren't singing as much. When I reached the ruins, that cold feeling hit me immediately, stronger than before. I set up my equipment methodically, cameras on tripods, voice recorder running, thermometer readings every few minutes. If something happened today, I'd have proof. The temperature was 43 degrees in the ruins, nearly 20 degrees colder than the surrounding forest. No matter how I tried to rationalize it, that difference was too big to explain with normal weather patterns. I started exploring a part of the settlement I hadn't seen before, further up the mountainside. Here the ruins were different. Not just homes, but what looked like a small schoolhouse and maybe a general store. This had been a real community, big enough to support its own businesses. As I photographed the foundation stones, I kept hearing small sounds, footsteps on leaves, branches moving when there was no wind, the scrape of metal on stone like someone sharpening a knife. But every time I looked up, nothing. Around midday, I was examining what looked like a family cemetery when I heard children laughing. Not distant this time, close, right there in the cemetery with me. I spun around, camera ready, but saw only weathered headstones and tall grass. The laughter continued. 2 or 3 kids playing some kind of game. I could hear them running around, their feet pattering on the ground, but I couldn't see them. "This isn't possible," I said out loud, more to convince myself than anything. The laughter stopped. Then, clear as day, a little girl's voice said, "Mama, there's a man in our graveyard." A woman's voice answered, worried, "Hush now, child. Come, away from there." I nearly dropped my camera. These voices weren't coming from somewhere else. They were right here, right next to me, but there was nobody here. "Please," I called out, feeling foolish but desperate. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just want to understand what happened to your people." Silence stretched out so long I thought they'd gone. Then the woman's voice, very quiet. "You're not one of the bad men?" "No," I said, looking around even though I couldn't see who I was talking to. "I'm a historian. I'm trying to learn about the Melungeon families who lived here." Melungeon. The word came out sad and bitter. That's what they called us when they wanted to hurt us. I stood very still, afraid that moving might break whatever was happening. "What did you call yourselves?" "We were just people, mountain people. We lived here peaceful until..." The voice faded. "Until what?" A man's voice this time, angry. "Until they came with their torches and guns. Said we didn't belong nowhere. Said we were an abomination." My throat went dry. This sounded like what Mrs. Collins had hinted at. "When did this happen?" "October of 1894, the woman's voice said. "They came at night. We tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. They surrounded the whole mountain." I pulled out my notebook with shaking hands. "What were your names? Your families?" "I was Sarah Denham," the woman said. "This here's my husband William, and our children Mary and Samuel." "Bobby Goins," another man's voice said. "My wife Ruth, and our 4 little ones." More voices joined in, giving me names and family connections. I wrote as fast as I could, but my hand was shaking so bad I could barely read my own writing. "How many of you are there?" I asked. 43 souls, Sarah said. "All that were left after the burning." "The burning?" William's voice turned grim. "They burned our houses with us in them. Shot anyone who tried to run, even the children." I felt sick. "All of you died that night?" "Not died," Sarah said sadly. "Couldn't die proper. The old woman, Granny Weatherly, she done something before they got her. Cursed us to the shadows so they couldn't hurt us no more. But we can't move on neither. Can't rest." "What do you mean, cursed to the shadows?" "Look at your camera, mister." I looked down at my camera and nearly dropped it. On the little display screen, I could see them. Dozens of people standing all around me. Men, women, children, all dressed in old-fashioned clothes from the 1800s. They looked real as life, but slightly see-through, like shadows made solid. I looked up from the camera. Still nothing with my bare eyes. Looked back at the camera. They were all still there, watching me with sad, hopeful faces. "We can't be seen by the naked eye," Sarah explained. "Only through machines like yours, and only by folks who are willing to see the truth." "The truth about what?" "About what was done to us. About how we were murdered for being different. About how the law covered it up and nobody ever got punished." I stared at the camera display, trying to process what I was seeing. 43 people who had died over 100 years ago, standing right in front of me. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Tell our story," William said. "Tell the world what really happened here. We can't rest until somebody knows the truth and sets it right." "How do I set it right?" "Make them remember," Sarah said. "Make them sorry for what was done. Get us a proper burial and a marker with our names on it. Get somebody in authority to say it was wrong." I looked around at all the faces on my camera screen, old and young, all looking at me with the same desperate hope. I'll try, I said. I promise I'll try. The little girl, Mary, stepped forward on my camera screen. Will you really, mister? Will you help us go home? Yes, I said, and meant it. I'll help you. The moment I said it, something changed. The air got warmer. The oppressive feeling that had been pressing down on me lifted slightly. Thank you, Sarah whispered, and her voice sounded closer to crying. We've been waiting so long for somebody to listen. I'll need to know everything, I said. Names, what happened, who was responsible. Can you tell me? We can show you, William said grimly, but you might not like what you see. Before I could ask what he meant, the world around me started to change. The ruins faded away, replaced by a bustling mountain settlement full of log cabins and people going about their daily lives. I was seeing Lost Mountain as it had been in 1894, and I was about to witness the nightmare that had trapped these people between worlds for over a century. The world around me shifted like I was watching a movie, but I could feel everything: the autumn air, the smell of wood smoke and cooking food, the sounds of a living community. I was still standing in the same spot, but now I was seeing Lost Mountain as it had been 129 years ago. Children played between log cabins while their mothers hung laundry on lines. Men worked in small gardens, harvesting the last vegetables before winter. It looked peaceful, normal, just mountain families living their lives. This is how it was before, Sarah's voice said, though I couldn't see her anymore. We were happy here, away from the hatred down in the valleys. I watched a man who must have been William teaching a young boy how to whittle. Women quilting together on a cabin porch. Teenagers laughing as they carried water from the spring. You had a good life here, I said. We did. For nearly 3 years we had peace. The scene around me began to darken. Not just evening coming on, but something more sinister. The happy sounds faded. People started looking toward the mountain trails with worried faces. They're coming, William's voice said, full of dread. I could hear them before I could see them. Men's voices, harsh and angry, echoing up from the valleys. The crack of branches as a large group pushed through the forest. The metallic sounds of guns and tools. The mountain families moved quickly, not panicking, but clearly following a plan they'd hoped they'd never have to use. Children were gathered, animals driven into the woods, valuable items hidden. You knew they were coming? We'd heard rumors, Sarah said. Someone down in the valley had been stirring up trouble, saying we were a danger to decent folk, saying we carried diseases, that we were part black and part Indian and part devil. Who was stirring up trouble? A man named Jeremiah Crawford. He wanted our land for logging. Easier to steal it if we were all dead. The first torches appeared on the trails like angry fireflies, dozens of them coming up from 3 different directions. The families on Lost Mountain were surrounded. Please, I whispered, knowing I couldn't change what was about to happen, but hoping somehow it wouldn't be as bad as I feared. It was worse. The attackers swarmed into the settlement like wolves. They weren't just after the adults. They came for everyone. I watched in horror as families were dragged from their homes and shot in their own yards, babies torn from their mothers' arms. I tried to close my eyes, but somehow I couldn't. I had to see it all, bear witness to every terrible moment. This is what nobody wanted to remember, William said grimly. This is what they covered up. Some families tried to run. The men with torches had planned for that too. They'd brought dogs. The sound of hunting hounds echoing through the mountains mixed with screams and gunshots and the roar of flames as cabin after cabin was set on fire. The old woman, Sarah said. Watch the old woman. I saw her then. Granny Weatherly, she must have been. Tiny and ancient, standing in front of the burning church as chaos raged around her. She was speaking words I couldn't understand, but the air around her seemed to shimmer. She was the wisest of us, Sarah explained. Knew the old ways, the old words. When she saw there was no escape, she made a different choice. What kind of choice? She cursed us to the shadows. Better to be trapped between worlds than let them win completely. Better to have a chance to tell the story someday than to just disappear and be forgotten. The shimmer around Granny Weatherly spread outward like ripples on water. As it touched each dying person, something strange happened. Their bodies faded, but their spirits remained, standing in the same spots but slightly transparent. The men with torches and guns kept shooting, but their bullets passed right through the shadow people. "What the hell?" one of the attackers shouted. "Where'd they go?" "Devil magic," another yelled. "Burn it all! Burn everything!" They set fire to every building, destroyed the gardens, even poisoned the well. By morning, there was nothing left but smoking ruins and confused stories about families that had simply vanished. "The authorities said we'd never existed," William said bitterly. "Said there was no settlement here, no massacre, no crime. Crawford got his logging rights, and everybody pretended 43 innocent people hadn't been murdered." The vision faded, and I was back in the present day, standing among the ruins with my camera showing me 43 ghost faces staring at me with desperate hope. "Now you know," Sarah said. "Now you've seen what really happened. Will you still help us?" I looked around at all their faces, families destroyed for being different, children killed for the color of their skin, an entire community erased from history by greed and hate. "Yes," I said firmly, "I'll help you. But I need more than just your testimony. I need proof that will convince the authorities." "What kind of proof?" William asked. "Documents, records, something that shows you existed, that Crawford was involved, that the massacre really happened." "The courthouse burned down in 1923, Sarah said sadly. "Most of the old records were lost." "But not all," another voice said. An elderly man stepped forward on my camera screen. "I'm Pastor John Mullins. I kept records of our births, deaths, marriages, hid them in a tin box before the attack." "Where?" "Under the altar stone of our church. If the box is still there..." I looked around the ruins, trying to figure out which foundation had been the church. "Can you show me?" The pastor's ghost walked to a pile of stones about 30 yards away. "Here. The altar stone is the big flat one. Box should be 2 feet down, wrapped in oilcloth." I didn't have a shovel, but I had my hands and a determination that surprised me. These people had been waiting 129 years for someone to tell their story. I could dig a hole. It took me an hour of scraping with rocks and sticks, but I found it. A rusty tin box wrapped in what had once been oilcloth, now mostly rotted away. Inside were water-damaged but readable documents. Birth certificates, marriage licenses. A list of all 43 people in the settlement, with their ages and family relationships. And most important, a letter dated October 15th, 1894. The letter was from Crawford to someone named Mayor Hoskins, detailing his plan to remove the mongrel settlement and claim the timber rights to Lost Mountain. He even mentioned hiring reliable men to handle the problem quietly. "This is it," I breathed. "This is proof." "Will it be enough?" Sarah asked anxiously. I looked at the documents, then at the faces on my camera screen. 43 people who had died horribly and been forgotten by history, their only crime being different in a world that couldn't tolerate difference. "It's going to have to be," I said, "because I'm not giving up until your story is told and your names are remembered." For the first time in our conversation, Sarah smiled. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for believing us." 6 months later, I stood on Lost Mountain again. But this time, I wasn't alone. Local officials, members of the Melungeon Heritage Association, descendants of the murdered families, and about 50 other people were gathered around a new granite monument that read, "In memory of the 43 souls of the Lost Mountain settlement, murdered October 1894. Their only crime was being different. Their legacy is the reminder that hatred must never again triumph over humanity." Below that were all their names, exactly as Pastor Mullins had recorded them in his tin box. Getting to this moment hadn't been easy. Crawford's letter and the pastor's records were enough to prove the massacre had happened, but convincing modern officials to acknowledge a 129-year-old crime took months of research, legal arguments, and media pressure. The breakthrough came when I found Crawford's great-great-grandson, a lawyer in Louisville who was horrified to learn about his ancestors' crimes. He not only supported our efforts but helped fund the memorial and pushed for an official county apology. The county commissioners had voted unanimously to acknowledge the massacre and apologize for the cover-up. The state was adding the Lost Mountain Massacre to official historical records. A scholarship fund had been established for Melungeon students. But more important than any of that was what I could see through my camera viewfinder. 43 people standing peacefully among the crowd, smiling as their names were read aloud for the first time in over a century. Sarah Denham, beloved wife and mother. William Denham, loving husband and father. Mary Denham, age 8, who loved wildflowers. Samuel Denham, age 6, who wanted to be a blacksmith like his papa. One by one, their names echoed across the mountain. One by one, I watched them begin to fade from my camera screen, finally free to move on to whatever comes after. Sarah was the last to go. She walked over to where I stood and spoke directly to me, though only I could hear her. "Thank you, David Ashworth. You gave us back our names and our story. You let us come home. Thank you for trusting me with the truth," I said quietly. She smiled one last time, then faded away like morning mist, finally at peace. The ceremony ended, but I stayed on the mountain until after dark. When I was finally alone, I walked through the ruins one more time, listening. No voices now. No cold spots. No shadows moving between the trees. Just the normal sounds of a mountain forest at night, and the whisper of wind through the trees that almost sounded like thank you. I still work at Cumberland Gap, still collect stories from mountain families, still carry my notebook everywhere. But now I know that some stories are more than just history. They're the voices of people who refuse to be forgotten. And sometimes, if you listen carefully enough and you're willing to believe, the dead will trust you with their truth. I keep my camera with me always now. You never know when someone might need their story told. The mountain is quiet these days, but I'm not the only one who visits the memorial. Families come to pay their respects, historians come to study the site, and sometimes tourists just stumble across it while hiking. They all ask me the same question. Is it true? Did this really happen? And I always tell them, yes, it really happened. The proof is carved in granite now, and the story will never be forgotten again. That's all Sarah and her family ever wanted, to be remembered, to have their truth acknowledged, to finally come home. Mission accomplished. My name is Marcus Grimwald, and I need to tell you what really happened in Devil's Backbone Ridge during the winter of 1963. The official report says it was an avalanche. That's a lie. I'm writing this down because I can't sleep anymore, and maybe if I get it out of my head, the dreams will stop. I was 23 then, fresh out of college with a forestry degree and absolutely no idea what I was walking into. I'd taken the ranger job in Daniel Boone National Forest to get away from Chicago, away from the memories, away from the guilt that ate at me every single day since Sarah died in that car crash. My fault, my drinking, my stupid decision to drive anyway. Kentucky seemed like the perfect place to disappear. Mountains, trees, silence. What could go wrong? I remember my first day meeting Jake Thornfield at the ranger station. He was 52, weathered like old leather, with hands that looked like they'd been carved from tree bark. He took one look at me, pale, soft, wearing brand new hiking boots that still had store tags, and shook his head. "City boy," he muttered, not mean, just stating a fact. "You ever been in real wilderness before, son?" I lied and said yes. Jake knew I was lying but didn't call me out on it. That's the kind of man he was. Patient, kind, the father I never had. Devil's Backbone is different, he told me as we loaded supplies into his beat-up pickup truck. Most remote section of the whole forest. Some of these mountains, nobody's set foot on them in decades. You stick close to me, you hear? And if I tell you to do something, you do it fast. No questions. I nodded, adjusting my thick glasses. The November air bit through my jacket, and we weren't even in the deep woods yet. The drive up took 3 hours, winding mountain roads that got narrower and more broken with each mile. Jake's truck rattled like it was falling apart. But he knew very pothole and curve. He'd been working these mountains for 30 years. See that ridge up there? He pointed through the windshield at a jagged line of peaks that looked like broken teeth. That's Devil's Backbone. Locals got all kinds of stories about it. Bad place, they say. Things happen up there that shouldn't happen. I laughed. I actually laughed. Come on, Jake. You don't believe in ghost stories, do you? His face went serious. Son, I've seen things in these mountains that would turn your hair white. You'd be smart to keep an open mind. But I was young and stupid and thought my college education made me smarter than mountain folk who'd lived here their whole lives. I thought I knew better. The base camp sat in a clearing halfway up the ridge. 2 small cabins, an equipment shed, and a radio tower that looked like it hadn't worked properly in years. Everything was covered in frost, even though it was only mid-November. Gets cold up here early, Jake said, shouldering his pack. And it stays cold longer than it should. Sometimes the snow doesn't melt until June. We spent the rest of that first day setting up gear and checking the cabins. Jake showed me the radio, the emergency supplies, the backup generator, all standard stuff. But as the sun started to set behind the mountains, I noticed something strange. The forest was completely quiet. No birds, no squirrels, no insects, nothing. Just the wind moving through bare branches. Where are all the animals? I asked. Jake stopped what he was doing and listened. Really listened. Then his face went pale. That's not normal, he said quietly. Something's got them spooked. That night, I lay in my sleeping bag, listening to the silence. It pressed down on me like a weight. Back in Chicago, there was always noise. Cars, people, sirens. This was different. This was the kind of quiet that made you wonder if you'd gone deaf. Around midnight, I heard Jake get up and walk outside. I heard him talking to someone in a low voice, but when I looked out the window, he was alone. Just standing there in the moonlight, speaking to empty air. When I asked him about it the next morning, he said I must have been dreaming. But I wasn't dreaming. And that was just the beginning. The second day started wrong. Jake woke up before dawn, already dressed, shaking my shoulder. We got a problem, he said. Radio call came in about an hour ago. Missing family, the Hendersons. They were supposed to check in yesterday from their campsite about 5 miles north. Never did. I pulled on my boots, still groggy. Maybe the radio died? Maybe. But Jake's voice said he didn't believe it. We need to hike up and check on them. Bring your first aid kit. And Marcus? He looked me dead in the eye. Stay close. Don't wander off, not even to take a piss. You understand me? The hike took us 2 hours through terrain that got rougher with each step. The temperature kept dropping, even though the sun was shining. My breath came out in white puffs, and frost crunched under our boots. We found the Henderson campsite in a clearing beside a frozen stream. At first, everything looked normal. 2 tents, still standing. A cold fire pit with logs arranged neatly around it. Backpacks hanging from a bear line between 2 trees. Then Jake pointed to the ground. Look at that, he whispered. 4 bodies lay in the center of the clearing, arranged in a perfect circle. But they weren't just dead. They were arranged, positioned, like someone had placed them there on purpose, and they were picked clean. Every bit of flesh stripped from their bones, but the bones themselves were arranged in neat piles beside each body. Arm bones with arm bones, leg bones with leg bones, skulls placed carefully at the head of each skeleton. I threw up. I couldn't help it. The smell hit me like a brick wall. Death and something else, something sweet and rotten that made my stomach turn inside out. Jake grabbed my shoulder. Get it together, son. We need to figure out what did this. Bears? I wiped my mouth with a shaky hand. Mountain lions? But even as I said it, I knew it was wrong. No animal did this. No animal arranged bones in neat little piles. Jake was examining the bodies, careful not to disturb them. His face was gray. Marcus, come look at this, but don't touch anything. I forced myself to get closer. The skulls had bite marks on them. Human bite marks. But the jaw impressions were huge, like someone with a mouth 3 times normal size had been chewing on them. What kind of person could do this? I asked. Jake didn't answer. He was staring at something else, tracks in the frost around the bodies, Footprints, but wrong. Too long, too narrow, with claw marks at the ends. "We need to get back to base," he said. "Call this in to headquarters. Let them send a team up here to deal with it." But as we turned to leave, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Laughter, high and thin, echoing off the mountains, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Jake grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. "Run," he said. "Run now." We ran, crashing through the trees, sliding down slopes, not caring about the noise we made, just getting away from that terrible laughter. Behind us, I heard branches breaking, something big moving through the forest, following us, keeping pace no matter how fast we ran. When we finally made it back to base camp, both of us were gasping and shaking. Jake went straight for the radio, but when he tried to call headquarters, all we got was static. "Lines must be down," he said, but his voice was shaking. That's when we noticed the truck. All 4 tires had been slashed. Deep, parallel cuts that could only have been made by claws. We were trapped. That night, neither of us slept. We took turns keeping watch, but it didn't matter. Something was out there, circling our sun. Aben. We could hear it moving around, just at the edge of the clearing. Sometimes it would scratch at the walls, long, slow scratches that sounded like fingernails on wood. Around 3 a.m., Jake decided to check the perimeter. He took his flashlight and his rifle and stepped outside. "Stay here," he told me. "If I'm not back in 10 minutes, barricade the door and wait for rescue." I watched through the window as his flashlight beam moved around the clearing, checking the tree line. Everything seemed normal for about 5 minutes. Then I heard him scream. It wasn't a normal scream. It was the sound a man makes when something unimaginable is happening to him. Pain and terror and disbelief all mixed together. I grabbed my own flashlight and ran outside, even though every instinct told me not to. "Jake," I called. "Jake, where are you?" His flashlight lay on the ground about 50 feet from the cabin, still on, casting a circle of yellow light on the frost. But Jake was gone. In the light, I could see something else. Pieces of his uniform, torn fabric scattered around like confetti, and blood. So much blood it looked black in the flashlight beam. But no body. No Jake. Just those same wrong footprints leading away into the darkness. I spent the rest of that night huddled in the cabin with a rifle across my lap, jumping at every sound. When morning finally came, I was exhausted and shaking, but I knew I had to do something. Jake was out there somewhere, maybe hurt, maybe still alive. I searched the entire area around the cabin, following the blood trail and those impossible footprints. They led north, deeper into the mountains, toward a part of Devil's Backbone I'd never seen before. The forest got stranger the farther I went. Trees grew at weird angles, twisted like they were in pain. The air smelled wrong, sweet and rotten, like meat left in the sun. And it was cold. So cold, my breath froze in the air before it could even form clouds. I found Jake 3 hours later, what was left of him. He was hanging upside down from a tree branch, about 15 feet off the Gia. Round. His body had been opened from neck to groin, and everything inside was gone. But his face was untouched. Eyes still open, staring at me with an expression of absolute terror. And carved into the tree trunk beneath him were symbols. Not letters or words, but shapes that hurt to look at. They seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. I was taking pictures of the symbols when I heard the voice. "Marcus." It was Jake's voice. But Jake was dead. Jake was hanging right above me, carved open like a deer. "Marcus, down here." I looked down. Jake was standing at the base of the tree, looking perfectly normal, alive, smiling. "What took you so long, partner?" he said. "I've been waiting." I stumbled backward, nearly falling. "You're dead. You're right there. You're dead." Jake, who wasn't Jake, tilted his head. "Dead? That's a funny word. I feel more alive than I have in years. Come closer, Marcus. I want to tell you something." His voice was exactly right. Same accent, same way of talking. but his eyes were wrong. Too wide, too hungry. "I know about Sarah," he said, and my blood turned to ice water. "I know about the accident, how you'd been drinking, how you convinced her to get in the car anyway, how she screamed your name right before the truck hit you." "Stop," my voice came out as a whisper. "How you walked away without a scratch, and she died alone in the hospital 3 days later. How you never even visited her, too ashamed, too guilty." "Stop!" But he kept talking, kept smiling, kept walking toward me with those hungry eyes. "She called for you, Marcus, at the end. Called your name over and over. But you weren't there. You were at home, drinking, feeling sorry for yourself." I ran. Again. Deeper into the mountains, away from Jake's voice, away from the truth I'd been running from for months. But you can't outrun guilt. And you can't outrun the things that feed on it. I found myself at another campsite that afternoon. Newer, a single tent with a Park Service logo. Inside, I found ID for Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a wildlife researcher who'd been reported missing 2 weeks ago. She was still alive. I found her sitting by a dead fire pit, eating something with her hands. She looked up when I approached and smiled. Her teeth were red. "Oh, thank God," she said. "Another person. I've been alone for so long." Then I saw what she was eating. Her own fingers. She'd gnawed them down to the bone, but she was still chewing, still swallowing. "The hungry one told me it would help," she said cheerfully. "It does help. I feel so much better now. Want to try some?" She held out her ruined hand, and I could see where she'd been working on her palm, tearing away strips of flesh with her teeth. "Please," she whispered, and for just a second her eyes cleared up. "Please kill me, before I become like them, before I get too hungry to remember who I used to be." I should have helped her. I should have done something. But I was a coward. I just backed away and left her there, still eating herself, still begging me to end it. That night, I made it back to the base camp cabin. The radio was working again, somehow. I tried calling for help, but every time I spoke into the microphone, my own voice came back to me through the speaker. "Help," my voice said from the radio. "Help me, please. I'm trapped on Devil's Backbone Ridge. Something killed my partner. Something's hunting me." But I wasn't talking. I was just listening to my own voice begging for help. Then other voices joined in. Jake's voice, Dr. Walsh's voice, the missing Henderson family, all of them calling for help, all of them using the radio frequency, all of them already dead. "Come find us, Marcus," they said in unison. "Come feed with us. Come be hungry with us." I smashed the radio with a chair leg and sat in the dark, shaking. Outside I could hear them moving around the cabin. All of them. Jake and Dr. Walsh and the Henderson family. Walking in, circles, getting closer with each step. And I was starting to feel it too. The hunger. Starting at the bottom of my stomach and spreading upward like cold fire. I looked at my hands in the moonlight coming through the window. My fingers looked longer than they had that morning, and my teeth felt sharp when I ran my tongue across them. Something was happening to me. Something terrible. And the worst part was, I was starting to like it. The transformation happened faster after that. By the next morning, I could see my breath even inside the heated cabin. My body temperature was dropping, but I didn't feel cold. I felt hungry. So hungry it hurt. I caught myself looking at the can of emergency rations and wondering what human meat would taste like. Then I found a journal in my jacket pocket, written in my own handwriting. But I didn't remember writing it. Day 3. Found the hunter near Black Bear Creek. Easy kill. Meat was tough but satisfying. Buried the bones where no one will find them. The hunger is stronger now. Can smell human scent from miles away. There's a survival training group coming up the South Trail tomorrow. 12 people. Enough to last the winter. I threw the journal across the room, but it just appeared back in my pocket. The words were true, even if I couldn't remember writing them. I had killed someone. I could taste blood in my mouth, and it tasted good. That's when I saw it for the first time. The thing that had been hunting me, changing me, feeding on my guilt. It stood 12 feet tall, thin as a skeleton, but impossibly strong. Its skin was gray-white like old bone, stretched tight over a frame that looked like it had been broken and put back together wrong. Its face was human, but the mouth was too wide, full of yellowed teeth that came to sharp points. And its eyes held all the hunger in the world. "Hello, Marcus," it said, but in a voice like winter wind. "I've been waiting for you to see me. Really see me." "What are you?" I whispered. "I'm what you made me," it said. "I'm every guilty thought you've ever had, every moment of shame, every drop of blood on your hands. I'm the hunger that follows cowards who run from what they've done." It moved closer, and I could see that its feet weren't quite touching the ground. "Your friend Jake tried to protect you, but his guilt was small, just little things. Hunting accidents. Times he let fear make his decisions. I ate him quickly. But you," it smiled wider, showing rows of teeth. "You have so much more to offer. A dead girlfriend. Years of running. The perfect seasoning for what I really need. What do you want from me?" "I don't want anything from you, Marcus. I want you to want something. I want you to be hungry. Like me." It reached out one impossibly long finger and touched my forehead. Instantly, I could smell them. The survival training group. 12 people camped about a mile south, sleeping in their tents. I could hear their heartbeats. I could taste their fear. And I wanted them. Wanted to hunt them, catch them, feed on them. "That's it," the creature whispered. "That's the hunger I've been growing in you. Stop fighting it, Marcus. Accept what you are." But somewhere deep inside, the part of me that was still human was screaming, fighting back. Remembering Sarah's face, not when she died, but when she laughed, when she was alive and beautiful and loved me despite all my flaws. "No," I said, and my voice sounded strange, deeper. "I won't do this." The creature's smile faded. "You don't have a choice. Look at your hands, Marcus." I looked down. My fingers had stretched longer, ending in sharp points. My skin was pale as winter frost. When I touched my face, I could feel fangs where my regular teeth used to be. "You're already changing," it said. "By tomorrow night, you'll be like me, hungry, hunting, and you'll help me feed on everyone who comes to these mountains." "What if I kill myself?" I asked. "What if I don't let you by? I'll win." It laughed, and the sound was like bones breaking. "Kill yourself? With what? Your ranger training? Your soft city hands? You're not brave enough to die, Marcus. That's why you ran here instead of facing what you did to Sarah." It was right. I was a coward, always had been. But maybe cowards could still choose how they died. I ran, one last time, not away from the creature, but straight at it. I tackled the thing that used to be my guilt and shame, and we went down together in a tangle of claws and teeth and hunger. It was like wrestling with winter itself, cold that burned, strength that crushed, hunger that ate at me from the inside. But for just a moment, I held on. I wrapped my arms around its neck and squeezed. "I'm sorry, Sarah," I whispered. "I'm sorry I killed you. I'm sorry I ran. I'm sorry for everything." And for just 1 second, the creature looked surprised. "You can't fight me with guilt," it hissed. "I am your guilt." "No," I said. "You're my hunger, my selfishness, my fear. But not my guilt. My guilt belongs to Sarah, and she forgives me." I don't know if that was true, but believing it was enough. The creature screamed and let go of me. I rolled away and grabbed Jake's rifle from where it had fallen. The creature was writhing on the ground, clutching its throat. "You can't kill me!" it shrieked. "I'm part of you now!" "I know," I said, and put the rifle barrel under my own chin. "If you die, I die hungry, and that's good enough." I should have died that night. The rifle was loaded. My finger was on the trigger. I was ready to end it all rather than become something that fed on innocent people. But the creature cheated. As I pulled the trigger, it lunged forward and knocked the rifle aside. The shot went wild, blowing a hole in the cabin wall instead of my head. "No," it snarled. "You don't get to escape that easily. If you won't transform, Lingley, I'll make you transform slowly, piece by piece, until there's nothing left of Marcus Grimwald except hunger." It grabbed me by the throat with one clawed hand and lifted me off the ground. "Feel it," it whispered. "Feel the cold spreading through your veins. Feel your heart slowing down. Feel your humanity dying one beat at a time." I could feel it, ice spreading through my chest, my arms, my legs. My vision was changing too. I could see in the dark now, could smell the fierce scent of animals hiding miles away. But I could also still feel Sarah, still remember her laugh, still remember what it felt like to love someone more than myself. "She's dead because of you," the creature hissed, reading my thoughts. "Dead and rotting in the ground while you play hero." "Yes," I said, "she is, and that's my fault. But letting you turn me into a monster won't bring her back. It'll just create more Sarahs, more people who die because of me." I don't know where the strength came from. Maybe from Sarah's memory, maybe from Jake's sacrifice, maybe from finally accepting what I'd done instead of running from it. But I grabbed the creature's wrist with both hands and held on tight. "We're going over the cliff together," I told it. "Both of us. Right now." Before it could react, I threw myself backward, pulling it with me. We crashed through the cabin wall and tumbled down the rocky slope behind the building, falling, rolling, bouncing off trees and boulders. I hit the bottom of the ravine hard enough to break 3 ribs in my left arm, but the creature hit harder. Its inhuman body was tougher than mine, but the fall had stunned it. For a moment, we both lay there gasping. Then it started to get up. "You can't kill me," it wheezed. "I'm eternal. I'm hunger itself." "Maybe," I said, struggling to my feet with my good arm. "But you're also winter, and winter always ends." I looked up at the sky. The sun was rising over Devil's Backbone Ridge, and for the first time in days, it actually felt warm on my face. The creature looked up too, and its eyes went wide with panic. "No," it whispered. "It's not time yet. Winter lasts longer here. It always lasts longer." But I could feel it too. The change in the air, the shift in the wind. Spring coming early to the mountains. The ice in my veins started to melt. The hunger in my belly started to fade. "Impossible," the creature said. But it was already getting weaker, smaller. Its bone-white skin was turning gray, then black, then crumbling like old paper. "Nothing's impossible," I told it. "You taught me that." It tried to crawl toward me, but there wasn't enough left of it to crawl. Just ash and old bones, and the memory of hunger. "I'll be back," it whispered with its last breath. "When winter comes again. When the next guilty soul arrives. I'll be back." Then it crumbled completely, and there was nothing left but dust blowing away in the spring wind. I made it down the mountain somehow. Took me 3 days with my broken ribs and my ruined arm, but I made it. The rescue team found me half dead from exposure on a Park Service road, babbling about wendigos and bone collectors. They put it in their report as trauma-induced hallucinations, exposure psychosis. The official story was that Jake and I had been caught in an early blizzard, and Jake died of hypothermia while I suffered severe frostbite and psychological breakdown. Simple, clean, easy to believe. I never went back to the mountains. Never worked as a ranger again. I moved back to Chicago, got a job in an office, tried to live a normal life. But every winter, when the temperature drops and the wind howls through the city streets, I can feel it stirring again. That old hunger, that cold fire in my chest. And I know that someday, maybe next winter, maybe in 10 years, some other guilty soul will run to Devil's Backbone Ridge looking for escape. When that happens, the creature will be waiting, stronger than before. Hungrier than before. Because that's the thing about guilt. It never really dies. It just waits for the next person foolish enough to think they can outrun what they've done. My name is Marcus Grimwald, and this is my warning. Don't go to Devil's Backbone Ridge in winter. Don't trust the voices that call your name in the dark. And whatever you do, don't feed the hunger, because once you start, you'll never stop wanting more. My name is Angela Darkwood, and I've been a park ranger at Great Smoky Mountains for 5 years now. People think it's a peaceful job, watching sunsets, helping lost hikers, keeping campfires safe. They're wrong. The mountains hold secrets that would break most people's minds. I should know. I used to have a PhD in physics before my world fell apart. The breakdown happened during my quantum research at the university. I was studying parallel realities, trying to prove that other versions of ourselves exist in different dimensions. The math was beautiful, perfect even. But when you stare too long into the impossible, sometimes it stares back. I started seeing things, glimpses of other me's living different lives. My professor said it was stress. The medication made everything fuzzy, so I stopped taking it and ran to these mountains instead. That was a mistake. Widow's Peak sits on the eastern edge of our territory, a jagged rock formation that looks like a mourning woman in black. Local Cherokee stories say it's where spirits cross between worlds. I used to laugh at those tales. Now I know better. The call came in on a Tuesday morning in October 1971. 2 hikers, Mark and Sarah Chen, had been found dead on the Peak Trail. What made it strange was their cameras. Both had taken dozens of photos right up until the moment they died. In the pictures, they were smiling, posing, acting like nothing was wrong. But their bodies told a different story. Massive claw marks, like something huge had torn them apart. I hiked up alone that morning, my boots crunching through frost-covered leaves. The October air was sharp and clean, but something felt off. The usual bird songs were missing. Even the squirrels seemed to have vanished. The silence pressed against my ears like cotton. When I reached the crime scene, I found something that made my old physics training kick in. The couple's W. Atch's had stopped at different times, his at 3:47 p.m., hers at 9:23 a.m. But according to the photos, they'd been together all day. The timestamps on their cameras showed pictures taken after their watches had stopped. I'd seen impossible things before during my research. This felt familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. That night, I spread the photos across my cabin floor, just like I used to do with equations. Mark and Sarah looked so happy in every shot. In the last photo, they were waving at the camera while something dark and massive loomed behind them. They couldn't see it, but the camera caught its outline. 7 feet tall, shaped like a man but wrong, like someone had stretched a person into a nightmare. I should have reported it to my supervisor. I should have called for backup. Instead, I did what I always do. I became obsessed. The next morning, I returned to Widow's Peak with every piece of equipment I could carry. Camera, audio recorder, compass, even a Geiger counter from my old university days. If something weird was happening, I'd measure it, document it, understand it. The trail felt different in daylight. My compass spun wildly near the actual peak, pointing in all directions like it couldn't decide which way was north. The Geiger counter clicked occasionally, picking up tiny radiation spikes that made no sense. Then I saw them. Mark and Sarah Chen were sitting on a boulder 20 feet from where their bodies had been found. They looked exactly like their photos. Same clothes, same backpacks, same happy expressions. Sarah was braiding flowers into her hair while Mark read a guidebook. I rubbed my eyes, blinked hard, looked again. Still there. "Excuse me," I called out. "Are you folks okay?" They turned toward me with those same bright smiles from the photos. "Oh, we're wonderful," Sarah said, "just enjoying this beautiful day. Have you seen the view? From the peak? It's like you can see forever." My hand moved to my radio, but something stopped me. In my peripheral vision, I could see crime scene tape fluttering where their bodies lay. When I looked directly at it, they were gone. When I looked back at the living couple, the crime scene vanished. "This isn't possible," I whispered. Mark laughed. "What isn't possible? We're just hiking, like everyone else." But they weren't like everyone else. As we talked, I noticed their shadows didn't match the sun's position. Sarah's flower crown kept changing. Daisies became roses, became wilted stems. Mark's guidebook showed different covers each time I glanced at it. "Where are you folks from?" I asked. "Here and there," Sarah said. "Everywhere and nowhere. We love to travel between places." The way she said "between" made my stomach drop. In my physics research, between meant the space that shouldn't exist, the gap where parallel realities touch. That's when I heard it, a low growling that seemed to come from the air itself. Both versions of the scene flickered like a bad TV signal. For just a moment, I saw something else, a massive shadow moving behind the trees, watching us all. "You should go," Mark said, but his voice sounded wrong, echoing like he was speaking from inside a cave. "Some places aren't meant for the living." I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I ran all the way back to my cabin and locked the door. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those smiling faces and heard that otherworldly growl. I pulled out my old physics textbooks and started doing math. If parallel realities could overlap, if the barriers between dimensions were thin in certain places, then what I'd seen was theoretically possible. The Cherokee stories suddenly didn't seem like folklore anymore. But understanding something and being able to handle it are very different things. The next day, 3 more hikers went missing on the same trail. The missing hikers were found a week later, all alive but changed. They couldn't remember how they'd gotten lost or where. Here they'd spent those 7 days. Their watches had run backward. Their photos showed events that hadn't happened yet. I started living on the trail, camping near Widow's Peak every night. My supervisor thought I was having another breakdown, but I couldn't leave. The wrongness was spreading, affecting a bigger area each day. Compasses failed for miles around. Cell phones picked up conversations from people who died years ago. Hikers reported seeing their own reflections walking ahead of them on the trail. That's when I met the shadow walker face to face. It happened on my 5th night camping. I woke up to my tent shaking, not from wind, but from something massive moving around outside. The growling was so deep I felt it in my bones. My flashlight beam passed right through the creature like it was made of thick smoke, but I could see its shape, tall as a basketball player, broad shoulders, arms that hung too long, and a head that was almost human, but stretched wrong, like someone had tried to sculpt a person from memory and gotten the proportions off. "Angela," it said in a voice like grinding stone, "you see us. You understand." "What are you?" I whispered. "We are between. We feed on confusion, on minds that cannot choose between realities. You have such a mind." It was right. My whole life had been spent trying to understand impossible things, trying to exist in the space between known and unknown. My breakdown at the university, my obsession with parallel realities. I'd been preparing for this my whole life without knowing it. "The others," I said. "Mark and Sarah. The missing hikers. They wander between now. Not alive, not dead. They exist in the spaces between seconds, between heartbeats. They are food that feeds forever." The creature stepped closer, and I saw more of them emerging from the trees. Dozens of shadow walkers, all slightly different, like they were the same being seen from different angles or different realities. "Why me?" I asked. "Because you broke first. Your mind cracked when you tried to see too much. Now you can see us. Help us, join us, or we will break you completely." I ran again, but this time the forest had changed. Trails led in circles. The same rock formations appeared over and over. My compass pointed to a different north every few minutes. I was lost in my own territory, trapped in a maze that existed between realities. When morning came, I found myself back at my cabin. But it was wrong, too. Photos on my wall showed me with people I'd never met. My ranger uniform had patches from parks that didn't exist. In the mirror, I looked older, younger, the same, all at once. I was losing pieces of myself to the between space. That day, I watched myself die. I was hiking up to the peak again when I saw her, another me, wearing the same uniform, carrying the same equipment. She looked exactly like me except for her eyes, which held a terror I'd never felt. She was running down the trail toward me, screaming, "Don't go up there! It's not real! None of this is real!" A shadow fell over her, and she was gone. Just gone. But I remembered dying, remembered the feeling of claws tearing through my chest, remembered my last breath. The memory was as real as any other, even though I was still alive to think about it. I understood then what was happening. The shadow walkers weren't just feeding on confusion. They were creating it by letting us experience multiple realities at once. Every choice we didn't make, every path we didn't take, every version of ourselves that existed in parallel dimensions, they were all bleeding through. And I was the crack they were using to get in. The revelation came to me in pieces, like a puzzle made of nightmares. The shadow walkers weren't just dimensional parasites. They were refugees. Their home dimension was dying, consumed by some even greater darkness. They needed to break through to ours, but reality has defenses, barriers between worlds that keep things separate. Those barriers were weakest in places where dimensions naturally touched. Places like Widow's Peak, where Cherokee shamans had always said the spirit world was close. But they needed help from our side, needed someone whose mind was already broken, already existing between realities. They needed me. For weeks, I'd been experiencing deaths from alternate timelines, living through versions of my life where I made different choices. I remembered getting married to a man I'd never met. I remembered having children I'd never had. I remembered dying as an old woman, dying as a child, dying 1,000 different ways. Each memory made me less solid, less anchored to any single reality. I was becoming like them, a being that existed between worlds. The government team arrived on a Thursday. Some kind of time research facility had detected the dimensional instability and sent specialists. They had equipment I'd never seen, machines that hummed with barely contained energy. Their leader, Dr. Martinez, took one look at the readings and ordered an immediate evacuation of the entire area. "This is beyond anything we've seen," he told me. "Reality itself is breaking down. In 24 hours, this whole region could collapse into dimensional chaos." But it was too late. The shadow walkers were already pouring through in greater numbers. The government team got lost in timeline loops, experiencing their own parallel deaths, becoming food for creatures they couldn't understand. That night, I made my choice. I climbed Widow's Peak one last time, carrying my physics textbooks and a plan that was equal parts genius and insanity. If the shadow walkers needed someone to anchor their invasion, then I could become an anchor for something else, a lock instead of a key. At the peak, reality was coming apart. I could see through to other dimensions, other versions of the mountains where not choices had been made. In one, the Cherokee had never left. In another, the mountains were glass and crystal. In a third, they burned with eternal fire. The shadow walkers surrounded me, dozens of them, all hungry, all ready to pour through the crack I'd helped create. "Join us willingly," their leader said, "and we will make your death quick across all realities." "I have a better idea," I said, and opened my textbooks. The math was beautiful, even here at the end of everything. Quantum mechanics, parallel dimension theory, the equations that had driven me crazy years ago, they all came together in one perfect, terrible solution. I could seal the breach, but only by spreading my consciousness across all the realities at once, becoming a permanent guardian between worlds. I would exist everywhere and nowhere, keeping the barriers strong, making sure the shadow walkers could never fully cross over. The cost was my humanity, my single, simple existence. I would become something like them, spread thin across infinite possibilities, never fully alive in any one world. As I spoke the equations aloud, reality solidified around me. The shadow walkers screamed as the between space collapsed, trapping them in a maze of their own making. The dimensional cracks began to heal, but slowly, requiring constant attention. I felt myself stretching, spreading, becoming something vast and strange. My body dissolved, but my mind expanded to fill the spaces between realities. That was 30 years ago. I'm still here, still watching, still keeping the barriers strong. I exist in every timeline now, every possible version of Angela Darkwood spread across infinite realities. In some, I never became a ranger. In others, I never broke down at all. But in all of them, I remember Widow's Peak and my choice to become its guardian. The Shadow Walkers are still trapped in my maze of consciousness, still hungry, still trying to break through. Every day is a battle to keep them contained. Sometimes one escapes, appears in our world for a few minutes before I can pull it back. Those are ours. Either stories people tell around campfires, glimpses of impossible creatures, encounters with things that shouldn't exist. The government classified Widow's Peak as a temporal hazard zone. No one hikes there anymore. The official story is unstable geology, risk of rock slides. Dr. Martinez visits sometimes, leaves equipment to monitor the dimensional stability. He's one of the few people who knows the truth, who understands what I became. I can see him now, in 17 different timelines, all of them growing old while I remain spread across the spaces between heartbeats. The hardest part isn't the loneliness or the constant vigilance. It's remembering which reality was originally real. After experiencing every possible version of my life, I can no longer tell which Angela I used to be. Was I the one who had children? The one who stayed at the university? The one who died young? It doesn't matter anymore. I am all of them and none of them, a ghost haunting the spaces between what is and what might be. But I keep watching. I keep the barriers strong, because the Shadow Walkers were just the first wave. There are other things in the darkness between dimensions, older and hungrier things that would make reality bleed if given the chance. The mountains still hold their secrets. I've become one of them. If you ever find yourself on a trail that doesn't appear on any map, if your compass starts spinning wildly and your watch runs backward, don't be afraid. That's just me, checking the barriers, making sure the between space stays closed. Walk away quietly. Don't look too hard at the shadows between the trees. And whatever you do, don't try to understand what you're seeing. Some knowledge breaks the mind that holds it, and once you're broken, you can see everything, including the things that should never be seen. Final word count, 4,947 words, approximately 15 minutes read. Time.